Alexander Pierce stood frozen before the antique mirror in his grandfather's study, barely recognizing the stranger who stared back at him. The impeccably tailored suits that had become his trademark as CEO of Legacy Trust Bank were replaced by off-the-rack khakis and a department store button-down that hung loosely on his frame. His signature silver-streaked hair, usually styled to perfection, was now hidden beneath a worn Boston Red Sox cap, and 2 weeks of untrimmed stubble obscured his usually clean-shaven jaw. Wire-rimmed reading glasses completed his transformation. From banking executive to middle-aged job seeker. "What would you think of me now, Dad?" he whispered to the portrait hanging above the fireplace, where his father's stern face watched over the room where he'd built Legacy Trust from a single branch into a regional banking powerhouse. The question lingered in the air, heavy with the weight of recent events that had shattered Alex's faith in the institution his family had spent 3 generations building. The anonymous emails had started arriving 3 months ago. At first, Alex had dismissed them as the typical complaints that any large bank received: dissatisfied customers, frustrated employees, the usual background noise of running a financial institution with over 50 branches across New England. But then came the message that made his blood run cold. "Your father believed in helping people achieve their dreams through honest banking," the unnamed sender wrote. "He'd be ashamed to see how Legacy Trust now preys on the vulnerable. Don't believe me? Visit branch number 274 in South Boston. Watch how many elderly customers leave in tears. But you won't, will you? You're too busy counting profits from your corner office to see how far your father's bank has fallen." Alex had immediately ordered an internal audit of branch number 274, but the results came back clean. Suspiciously clean, as if someone had sanitized the records. His compliance team suggested bringing in external auditors, but Alex had watched enough corporate investigations to know that formal probes only pushed problems deeper underground. The moment auditors walked in, papers would be shredded, computer files would be deleted, and whatever was happening would be buried so deep he'd never find the truth. No, this required something more drastic. If he wanted to understand what was really happening at Legacy Trust, he needed to see it through the eyes of someone who wasn't Alexander Pierce III, the CEO whose arrival was heralded by nervous managers and rehearsed presentations. He needed to become someone else entirely. And so Thomas Sullivan was born, a former bank teller from Ohio with a spotty employment history and a desperate need for work. His background check would show just enough experience to be qualified, but not enough to raise suspicions. The resume had enough small gaps and inconsistencies to make him seem real. No one's employment history was too perfect these days. The drive to branch the 274 that morning felt surreal. Instead of his usual chauffeur-driven Mercedes, Alex navigated through South Boston's narrow streets in a used Volkswagen Jetta with a slightly misaligned front end and over 100,000 miles on the odometer. The car had cost him less than one of his bespoke suits, but it was perfect for Thomas Sullivan's backstory. The branch building itself was a modest 2-story structure that had seen better days. The Legacy Trust logo above the entrance was faded, and the windows needed washing. Alex had driven past this location dozens of times, but had never really looked at it. Now, joining the small group of customers waiting for the doors to open at 8:45 a.m., he saw everything through new eyes. An elderly woman with a cane stood next to him, clutching a manila envelope to her chest. Her hands trembled slightly as she checked her watch for the 3rd time in as many minutes. There was something in her expression, anxiety, fear, that made Alex's chest tighten. What was in that envelope that had her so worried? The branch manager, Patricia Morrison, arrived precisely at 8:45, unlocking the doors with practiced efficiency. Alex recognized her from quarterly performance reports. Branch number 274 consistently showed strong growth in new accounts and loan originations. He'd even signed off on her last bonus recommendation without a second thought. "Good morning, everyone." Morrison's voice was warm and professional as she ushered them inside. "Thank you for choosing Legacy Trust. We'll be with you shortly." Alex followed the small group into the lobby, taking in details his CEO eyes had never noticed in branch photos. The inspirational posters about saving for the future and building dreams through smart banking felt hollow somehow, their smiling faces at odds with the fluorescent lights that cast harsh shadows across worn carpet tiles. The elderly woman with the envelope made her way to a chair in the waiting area, perching on its edge as if ready to flee. "Mr. Sullivan?" A sharp voice cut through his observations. "Thomas Sullivan." Alex turned to see a young woman in a crisp blazer approaching him, her heels clicking against the floor with military precision. Her name tag identified her as Jessica Chen, assistant branch manager. "That's me," Alex replied, carefully maintaining the slight Midwestern accent he'd practiced for weeks. "Follow me. Your orientation starts in 5 minutes." Chen's smile was professional, but didn't reach her eyes. "Ms. Morrison is very particular about punctuality." As Alex followed her through a door marked "Employees Only," he caught a glimpse of the elderly woman being led to a desk by one of the personal bankers. Something in the banker's smile made his skin crawl. It reminded him of a nature documentary he'd once watched about predators stalking their prey. What had happened to his father's bank? And more importantly, what was he about to discover as Thomas Sullivan, the newest teller at branch number 274? His phone buzzed in his pocket, another message from the anonymous sender. "Welcome to the real Legacy Trust, Mr. Sullivan. Try not to let it break your heart." The employee orientation room was a cramped space in the basement that smelled faintly of mold and coffee. Alex sat amongst 3 other new hires, a young college graduate, a middle-aged woman returning to work, and a former retail worker looking for a career change. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, creating an atmosphere that felt more like an interrogation room than a welcoming space for new employees. Patricia Morrison burst through the door exactly 7 minutes late, though Alex noticed no one dared to mention this, despite her earlier emphasis on punctuality. She carried herself with the authority of someone who knew they were untouchable. Her designer suit a stark contrast to the basement's shabby surroundings. "Welcome to Legacy Trust," Morrison announced, her smile not quite masking the condescension in her tone. "You're here because we're experiencing unprecedented growth. Our branch has the highest new account numbers in the region. We achieve this through proactive customer service." She paused, scanning their faces. "Some of you won't make it past the first week. Banking isn't for the weak." Alex watched his fellow trainees shift uncomfortably in their chairs. The college graduate David looked particularly nervous, his fresh-pressed shirt already showing sweat stains under the arms. The returning worker, Martha, clutched, her notebook tighter, while the former retail worker, James, maintained a stoic expression. The morning's training was a blur of compliance regulations and banking procedures, but Alex noticed something odd. Morrison spent more time explaining sales techniques than actual banking operations. "Every customer who walks through that door is an opportunity," she emphasized. "They might come in to deposit a check, but they should leave with a new credit card, a home equity line, or an investment account. No exceptions." When Alex raised his hand to ask about assessing customer needs and financial situations before recommending products, Morrison's eyes flashed with irritation. "Listen, Sullivan," she said, "if you're already worried about customer needs, maybe banking isn't for you. Our job is to meet quotas. The customer's jobs are to make smart decisions with the products we offer. During their brief lunch break, Alex found himself sharing a small table with Martha in the break room. Her hands trembled slightly as she unwrapped her sandwich. "I worked at First National for 15 years before taking time off for family," she whispered, glancing nervously at the door. "This isn't right. The sales pressure, the quotas, it's predatory." Before Alex could respond, Jessica Chen appeared in the doorway. "Break's over. Time for practical training." Her timing was too perfect to be coincidental. They were being watched. The afternoon session revealed even more disturbing practices. They were taught to look for vulnerability indicators, medical bills in deposit slips, recent widows, retirees with substantial savings accounts. "These customers need our help managing their money," Morrison explained with a predatory smile. "They just don't know it yet." Alex watched in growing horror as they were shown how to manipulate the bank's computer system to make certain fees less visible, how to rush through disclosure documents, and how to pressure customers into signing up for products they didn't need. When James questioned the ethics of targeting elderly customers, Morrison's response chilled Alex to the bone. "Ethics don't pay bonuses," she said sharply. "Besides, we're doing them a favor. Better they trust their money to Legacy Trust than waste it on their ungrateful families or fall for some internet scam." As the day drew to a close, Alex noticed David, the college graduate, looking increasingly pale. During their final break, he found the young man in the bathroom, splashing water on his face. "I can't do this," David muttered, not realizing Alex had entered. "My grandparents lost their savings to predatory banking. I thought Legacy Trust was different. I thought." He stopped short when he noticed Alex, quickly drying his face and hurrying out. The final hour of training introduced them to the Special Accounts Department, a euphemism that set off every alarm bell in Alex's head. They were shown how to identify high-value targets, recent inheritances, retirement payouts, home equity. Chen demonstrated their conversion script, a carefully crafted series of questions designed to convince customers to move their life savings into complex investment products with hidden fees and penalties. As Alex gathered his things to leave, Morrison called him into her office. The space was decorated with sales award plaques and motivational posters about success. "Sullivan," she said, studying him carefully, "I noticed your hesitation today. Let me be clear. We have weekly quotas. Those who don't meet them don't last long, but those who excel—" She gestured to her luxurious office. "The rewards are substantial. So are you in, or should we process your resignation now?" Alex forced himself to smile, channeling Thomas Sullivan's desperation for employment. "I'm in," he assured her, "just taking it all in. It's different from my last bank." "Good," Morrison nodded, satisfied, "because tomorrow you start handling real customers. And remember, every customer has a price point. Our job is to find it and exceed it." Walking to his Jetta that evening, Alex's mind raced. One day had revealed more than a month of internal audits. The predatory practices, the pressure tactics, the targeting of vulnerable customers. It was all carefully orchestrated. But something told him this was just the surface. Morrison's confidence, the systematic nature of the abuse, the way Chen watched their every move, it suggested protection from higher up. His phone buzzed again. "Now you see the small stuff, but ask yourself, where does all that bonus money really come from? Some secrets are kept in vaults that don't appear on any floor plan. Sweet dreams, Mr. Sullivan. Tomorrow gets worse." Alex's second day at branch number 274 began with a sharp reminder of the reality facing Legacy Trust's customers. He arrived early, hoping to observe the morning procedures, only to find the elderly woman from yesterday waiting outside, clutching the same manila envelope. Dark circles under her eyes suggested she hadn't slept. Mrs. Reynolds, Jessica Chen greeted her with practiced warmth, unlocking the doors 15 minutes early. We've been expecting you. Let's finish processing your reverse mortgage application. Alex's stomach tightened. Reverse mortgages were legitimate financial products, but they were also complex instruments that could be devastating if misused. He'd fought to maintain strict ethical guidelines around their promotion, but watching Mrs. Reynolds shuffle inside, he wondered how many of those guidelines actually reached branch level. The morning rush brought a steady stream of customers, and Alex found himself positioned at the third teller window, handling routine transactions while trying to maintain his cover. His banking experience as CEO proved both helpful and dangerous. He had to consciously slow himself down, pretend to check procedures he knew by heart, and bite his tongue when he spotted obvious compliance violations. Around mid-morning, a young teller named Rachel Martinez was assigned to train him on the computer system. As they worked, Alex noticed something odd about the way she processed certain transactions. For regular deposits, she followed standard procedures, but when elderly customers came in, she would click through a series of screens so quickly he could barely follow. "Watch and learn," Rachel whispered as an elderly man approached her window. "Mr. Davidson, wonderful to see you. How's your grandson's college fund coming along?" The transaction seemed routine, a simple deposit into a savings account. But Alex caught Rachel's subtle manipulation of the system, adding what appeared to be account maintenance fees that weren't disclosed. When the customer left, Rachel turned to Alex with a conspiratorial smile. "Senior accounts are gold mines," she explained. "They rarely check their statements online, and if they notice the fees, we blame it on new federal regulations. Most are too embarrassed to admit they don't understand banking terms." Alex felt sick, but Thomas Sullivan nodded appreciatively. "Clever," he managed. "But what if they complain to regulators?" Rachel's laugh was bitter. "Complaints get lost in the system. Besides, Morrison has friends in the regional office. We're untouchable as long as we meet quotas." The morning's revelations were disturbing, but it was a conversation during lunch that truly shook Alex. He found himself sharing the break room with Sarah Patel, a senior teller who'd been with the branch for 5 years. She looked exhausted, pushing her salad around without eating. "Rough day?" Alex ventured. Sarah glanced at the cameras in the corner before responding. "Mrs. Reynolds," she said quietly. "She's the third one this month. We're supposed to report. Suspicious transactions, you know. Protect seniors from fraud, but who protects them from us?" Alex leaned forward, keeping his voice low. "What do you mean?" "Her son died last year. Insurance payout. She came in to deposit it, just wanting a simple savings account." Sarah's hands trembled. By the time Morrison and Chen finished with her, they had her signing up for a reverse mortgage, moving her insurance money into high-risk investments, and taking out a home equity line she didn't need or want. Said it was all part of an estate planning package. "That's more than predatory lending," Alex said carefully. "That's elder abuse?" Sarah finished. "Yeah, but it gets worse." She lowered her voice further. "Some of our elderly customers, their accounts show unusual patterns. Large withdrawals, transfers to accounts I can't trace. When I tried to file a suspicious activity report, Morrison intercepted it, said some transactions are special handling only." A commotion from the lobby interrupted them. Alex returned, to find Mrs. Reynolds at Chen's desk, crying softly as she signed document after document. The manila envelope lay open, revealing what looked like property deeds and insurance papers. "Just a few more signatures," Chen was saying soothingly. "Think of it as securing your legacy. You don't want to burden your grandchildren with financial decisions when you're gone, do you?" Alex watched helplessly as Mrs. Reynolds signed away what he suspected were her last financial protections. The woman's hands shook so badly she could barely hold the pen, but neither Chen nor Morrison, who stood watching approvingly, showed any sign of conscience. As the day wound down, Alex noticed Rachel staying late, working intently at her computer. When she thought no one was watching, she pulled a USB drive from her purse and inserted it into her terminal. Alex pretended to be occupied with balancing his drawer while observing her rapid keystrokes. His phone vibrated. Another message from his mysterious informant. Ask Rachel about Operation Golden Years. Ask her about the offshore accounts. Ask her why she cries herself to sleep every night, but be careful who hears you ask. Some questions have fatal answers. Alex looked up sharply, but Rachel was already hurrying out, her face pale, the USB drive clutched tightly in her hand. Something about her expression reminded him of a hostage trying to act normal, with a gun to their head. The pieces were starting to form a disturbing picture. This wasn't just about aggressive sales tactics or hidden fees. The unusual transactions, the intercepted reports, the special handling accounts, it all pointed to something far more sinister. But he needed proof, and more importantly, he needed to understand how deep the corruption went. Tomorrow he decided he would try to talk to Rachel alone. She knew something that terrified her, and maybe, just maybe, she was ready to tell someone the truth, even if that someone was just a newly hired teller named Thomas Sullivan. Alex arrived at the branch before dawn, on his third day, hoping to catch Rachel before the morning staff meeting. The parking lot was empty, except for a sleek black Audi he recognized as Morrison's, and surprisingly, Rachel's weathered Toyota Corolla. Perfect timing. He found her in the break room, hands wrapped around a coffee cup, staring into space. Dark circles under her eyes suggested another sleepless night. When she saw him, she nearly knocked over her cup. "Mr. Sullivan, I was just reviewing some procedures." She quickly moved to close a folder on the table, but not before Alex caught glimpse of what looked like account numbers and offshore banking codes, information a regular teller shouldn't have access to. "Rachel," he said softly, closing the break room door, "I think you need someone to talk to. I saw you yesterday with the USB drive. I've noticed things just like you have." Her face went pale. "You don't understand. Nobody can understand unless—" She stopped abruptly, eyes darting to the camera in the corner. Alex casually moved to block its view. "Unless what?" Tears welled in her eyes. "They have my sister," she whispered, so quietly he almost missed it. "She's in a legacy trust-managed care facility. They'll transfer her to the worst nursing home in the state if I don't help them." "Help them with what?" Before Rachel could answer, the break room door swung open. Morrison stood there, her smile sharp as a razor. "Early morning. Conspiracy session? How productive. Rachel, dear, Mr. Chen would like to see you in his office. Now." Alex's mind caught on the name. Mr. Chen? He knew Jessica Chen was the assistant manager, but he'd never heard of a Mr. Chen in the company hierarchy. Rachel practically ran from the room, leaving her folder behind. Morrison's smile never wavered as she picked it up. "Curious about our special accounts, Sullivan? Don't be. Some questions are better left unasked, like why certain elderly customers' life savings disappear after they pass away, or why their grandchildren never receive their inheritances." The threat was clear, but something else nagged at Alex. Morrison was being too obvious, too bold. She wanted him curious. This was a test. The morning staff meeting revealed why. Morrison announced that Mr. Chen, their regional compliance director, would be visiting next week for a special audit. "He's particularly interested in meeting our newer employees," she added, looking directly at Alex, "making sure they fit in." The day unfolded with a parade of elderly customers, each leaving with fewer assets and more complex financial products than they'd arrived with. Alex watched helplessly as life savings were systematically stripped away through a combination of high-pressure sales tactics and outright fraud. During his lunch break, he managed to access the branch's customer database through his terminal. What he found made his blood run cold. Dozens of elderly customers had died in the past year, all with substantial accounts. Within days of their deaths, their money had been transferred through a maze of accounts before vanishing completely. The transactions were marked with a code he'd never seen before. Operation Golden Years. A soft sob from the adjacent cubicle. It caught his attention. Sarah was staring at her screen, one hand pressed to her mouth. When she saw Alex watching, she quickly minimized her window, but not before he glimpsed what looked like a threatening email. "Sarah," he whispered, "what's really happening here?" She glanced around before responding. "They're killing them," she breathed, horror etched on her face. Not directly, but the stress, the fear about losing everything. Mrs. Anderson had a heart attack right after they pressured her into emptying her retirement account. Mr. Thompson stroked out in the parking lot after Morrison threatened to foreclose on his house. And their money. It all disappears. Alex felt the pieces clicking together. The predatory practices weren't just about fees and commissions. They were weaponizing financial stress against the elderly and somehow profiting from their deaths. But why involve so many people? Why risk exposure? His answer came that afternoon when he overheard Chen and Morrison in the conference room. "The numbers are too obvious," Chen was saying. "We need more legitimate transactions to hide the Operation Golden Years transfers, push more home equity loans, more reverse mortgages, make it look normal." "The tellers are getting squeamish," Morrison replied. "Especially the new one, Sullivan. He asks too many questions." "Then motivate them, find their weaknesses. Everyone has a price or a pressure point, and if that doesn't work—" Chen's voice dropped to a whisper, but Alex caught the last words. "There's always room in the program for more participants." Alex's phone buzzed with another anonymous message. "Now you see the game, but you don't know all the players yet. Ask yourself, why did the last 3 branch managers die? In accidents? Why do certain account numbers match dates of death? The truth is in Vault 274B, but beware, some doors, once opened, can never be closed." He looked up to find Rachel watching him, her expression a mixture of terror and resignation. She mouthed 2 words that made his heart stop. "Help us." The next morning arrived shrouded in a thick New England fog, matching Alex's increasingly dark mood. He'd spent the night researching the 3 previous branch managers Rachel had mentioned. Their deaths, spread over 5 years, seemed perfectly ordinary on the surface. A car accident on an icy road, a home invasion gone wrong, a tragic sailing accident. But all 3 had occurred within weeks of filing internal reports about irregular account activity at branch No. 274. He arrived early again, but this time he wasn't alone. A group of maintenance workers was busy installing new security cameras, their legacy trust uniforms crisp and clean, too clean for people who supposedly crawled through ceiling spaces. One of them caught his eye, and Alex noticed something odd. The man's hands were manicured, his watch a Patek Philippe worth more than a year's maintenance salary. Inside, the branch hummed with unusual activity. Morrison was giving a tour to a distinguished-looking Asian man in an impeccable suit. Mr. Chen himself, Alex presumed. Behind them trailed Jessica Chen, her usual confidence replaced by deferential anxiety. Family resemblance suggested a father-daughter relationship, explaining her protected status. "Sullivan!" Morrison's voice cut through his observations. "Perfect timing. Show Mr. Chen how you handle the morning vault check." Alex's pulse quickened. The vault, perhaps his only chance to find proof of what was happening. But as he led them downstairs, he realized this was also a test. One wrong move, one slip in his play act as Thomas Sullivan, and he'd never leave this basement. The main vault was standard bank issue, its thick door bearing Legacy Trust's logo. But as Alex performed the security checks, he noticed something his years of banking experience flagged immediately. The vault's model number didn't match its apparent age. This door was newer than the rest of the branch's infrastructure, yet it had been artificially aged to appear original. "Satisfactory," Mr. Chen announced after watching Alex work. "Now the special holding section." Morrison swiped her card at a hidden panel, revealing a second door, Vault 274B. Alex's heart pounded. This was the vault mentioned in the anonymous message, but he never expected to access it so soon. "Your credentials won't work here, Sullivan," Morrison said with a smirk. "This section is for selective clientele." As they turned to leave, Alex caught a glimpse through the partially open door. Rows of safety deposit boxes, but with an unusual modification. Each box had a small digital display, showing what looked like countdown timers. Back upstairs, the morning brought a new wave of elderly clients. But now Alex noticed a pattern. Each one who entered Morrison's office emerged with not just new accounts, but also papers for a safety deposit box in Vault 274B. Their hands shook as they signed, but not from age, from fear. During lunch, Sarah slipped him a note beneath her sandwich wrapper. "Meet me in the file room at 3. I can't live with this anymore." The hours crawled by. Alex processed transactions mechanically, his mind racing. The vault's countdown timers, the suspicious deaths, Operation Golden Years, pieces of a puzzle too horrific to contemplate, were starting to fit together. At precisely 3 p.m., Alex made his way to the file room, a dusty space filled with old loan documents. Sarah was already there, clutching a thick folder. "I've been collecting evidence," she whispered, hands trembling. "Account numbers, death dates, insurance policies. It's all connected. The safety deposit boxes, the timers." "Tell me," Alex urged gently. "They target elderly customers with substantial assets but few family connections. Pressure them until they're desperate, then offer a solution, a special investment program, guaranteed returns. The customers sign everything over to numbered accounts, get a safety deposit box in 274B, and then..." A noise at the door made them both freeze. Sarah shoved the folder into Alex's hands just as Jessica Chen walked in. "How cozy!" Chen smiled, but her eyes were cold. "Dad would love to hear about this little meeting, especially since we just received some interesting information about Thomas Sullivan's background check." Sarah's face went white. "I was just helping him find some old forms." "Of course you were." Chen's smile widened. "By the way, Sarah, your mother's nursing home called. They're concerned about her. Deteriorating condition. Perhaps you should visit her while you still can." The threat hung in the air like poison gas. Sarah fled the room, leaving Alex alone with Chen. "You and Rachel seem quite curious about our special accounts," Chen said softly. "Curiosity isn't a desirable trait here, Mr. Sullivan, unless perhaps you'd like to see how Operation Golden Years really works. We have an opening in tomorrow night's session. After all, the best way to keep a secret is to make someone complicit in it." Alex recognized the moment for what it was. A chance to see behind the curtain, but also potentially a trap. Chen was too confident, too willing to reveal information. Either she was testing him or... His phone buzzed one last time. "They know who you are. Tonight's your only chance. Vault 274B, midnight. Sarah will help you, but only if you get to her before they do. The truth dies with her otherwise." Looking up, he saw Chen watching him with her father's predatory smile. The game had changed. He was no longer the hunter, but the hunted. Whatever was happening in Vault 274B, he had mere hours to uncover it, save Sarah, and find a way to expose the truth before becoming another tragic accident in Legacy Trust's growing list of casualties. The remaining hours of the business day crawled by with excruciating slowness. Alex processed transactions mechanically, hyper-aware of the surveillance now focused on him. Morrison hadn't left her office, but he could feel her watching through the glass panels. Two of the maintenance workers had taken up positions near the exits, their tool belts suspiciously light. Sarah hadn't returned from her break. Her terminal remained logged in, her half-eaten lunch still on her desk. When Alex casually asked about her whereabouts, Jessica Chen's response chilled him to the bone. "Family emergency," she said, examining her manicured nails. "Her mother's condition became quite serious, but don't worry, we've arranged special care for both of them." At 5 p.m., instead of leaving with the other employees, Alex made a show of struggling to balance his drawer. Morrison appeared at his shoulder, her perfume cloying in the empty lobby. "Problems, Sullivan? I'd be happy to help you. Stay late." The invitation was a trap, but also an opportunity. "These transactions from the special accounts," he said, feigning confusion. "The routing numbers don't match our standard format." Morrison's smile widened fractionally. "Ah, you noticed. Perhaps you'd be interested in learning more about our premium services. Mr. Chen is hosting a special presentation tonight, midnight, in the executive conference room. Very exclusive, very career-advancing." Alex recognized the rhetoric. The same language used to lure elderly clients into their schemes. He was being offered a choice: become complicit or become a victim. "I'd be honored," he replied, matching her predatory smile. After Morrison left, Alex found a note tucked into his cash drawer. Sarah's handwriting was shaky but legible. 274B timer synced to account closures. Golden years. Insurance fraud. Boozelder exploitation. Evidence in box 1392. Get it before midnight meeting. RM knows everything. RM? Rachel Martinez. The teller who'd been helping him, whose sister was being held hostage. She was still here somewhere, possibly his only remaining ally. Alex waited in his car until the parking lot emptied, then drove around the block, several times to ensure he wasn't followed. At 11 p.m., he parked behind a neighboring building and made his way back through the shadows. The fog had thickened, providing welcome cover. The back door's security panel accepted his code. They wanted him to come in, to walk into whatever trap they'd set. The branch was dark except for the emergency lights, casting long shadows across the empty lobby. As Alex crept toward the vault area, a muffled sob from Morrison's office caught his attention. Rachel sat at Morrison's desk, her face streaked with tears as she typed frantically at the computer. When she saw Alex, she nearly screamed. "They moved up the timeline," she whispered. "Tonight's not just a meeting, it's an execution. Sarah discovered too much, asked too many questions. They're going to close her account along with the others." "The others?" Rachel's hand shook as she turned the monitor toward him. On the screen, a spreadsheet showed dozens of names, each with a corresponding safety deposit box number and timer countdown. All were set to trigger at midnight. "The boxes are rigged," Rachel explained, her voice hollow. "When the timers hit 0, they destroy everything inside. Documents, evidence, account information. They time it to coincide with the accidents." "They're killing their own customers," Alex said, the horrible truth finally clear. "Forcing them to sign everything over to numbered accounts, then eliminating them to access the funds. The vault destroys the evidence, while the victims have convenient accidents." "It's worse," Rachel choked. "The accidents, they're not random. The safety deposit boxes, they don't just destroy documents. The clients are given special items to store, items laced with untraceable toxins. When they access their boxes, the pieces clicked into place. The timing of the deaths, the pristine accident scenes, the lack of investigation. Every victim had visited their safety deposit box shortly before their accident. Sarah's mother isn't sick, is she? They're holding her in the vault. Rachel nodded. Sub-level C, where they keep the collateral. My sister, Sarah's mother, others, insurance to keep us quiet. But tonight they're cleaning house. Too many questions, too many weak links, the midnight meeting. Everyone who knows too much will be there. One final cleanup before Mr. Chen transfers to the next branch. Alex's blood ran cold as he remembered the maintenance workers' expensive watches. Professional cleaners, not bank employees. This wasn't just fraud. It was a systematic killing operation, moving from branch to branch, leaving no witnesses. Where's Sarah now? In Vault 274B, they caught her trying to access Box 1392, where she'd hidden copies of everything. Morrison has the only key in her private safe. Rachel glanced at the clock, 11:40 p.m. You have 20 minutes before the timers hit zero, before they finish the cleanup. Alex stood, mind racing. You said Morrison has a safe? In the wall behind her degrees, but you'll never crack it in time. A grim smile crossed Alex's face as he pulled out his phone, dialing a number he'd hoped never to use. I don't need to crack it. Those degrees on the wall. This is my bank. I signed them. As CEO, he'd insisted on having emergency override codes for every branch system. He'd just never imagined he'd be using them to prevent mass murder in his own vault. The phone rang once before connecting. A familiar voice answered, Director of Security. Authorization code Pierce Alpha 274. I need an emergency vault override, and I need it now. Rachel's eyes widened as she finally realized who Thomas Sullivan really was, but there was no time for explanations. They had 19 minutes to save Sarah, stop a murder scheme, and expose decades of corruption. All while surviving what was about to become the deadliest shareholders' meeting in banking history. Override codes accepted. Emergency vault access granted. The automated system's voice echoed in the empty bank as Alex and Rachel raced down the stairs. They had 17 minutes until midnight. Wait! Rachel grabbed his arm. The maintenance men, Chen's cleanup crew, they're still here. As if on cue, footsteps echoed from above. Alex pulled Rachel into a supply closet, just as two men in workers' uniforms descended the stairs, their tool belts now clearly holding weapons instead of wrenches. Check the vault, one ordered. Chen wants no surprises tonight. Alex's mind raced. The override had granted them access, but it had also triggered alerts. Chen would know someone had used executive codes. Their element of surprise was gone. There's another way in, Rachel whispered. Through the old pneumatic tube system. It connects to sub-level C, where they're holding Sarah's mother and my sister. The tubes were sealed off years ago, but the maintenance access is still there. The service tunnels were cramped and dusty. As they crawled through decades of forgotten infrastructure, Alex's phone buzzed one final time. Hope you're good at multitasking. The timer system isn't just for vault boxes. The whole sub-level is rigged. End of shift. End of witnesses. Rachel led them to a rusty grate. Through it, they could see into sub-level C, a converted storage area now holding makeshift cells. Sarah's mother and Rachel's sister were there, along with 3 other hostages. All were unconscious. Gas, Rachel explained. They keep them sedated between visits from their families, compliance insurance. A noise from above made them freeze. Through the grate, they watched Morrison enter, followed by Jessica Chen. They were escorting Sarah, who looked drugged but conscious. Time to join your mother, Morrison said, her voice sickly sweet. Mr. Chen was quite disappointed by your snooping, but don't worry, after tonight all your troubles will be over. The documents, Sarah slurred. I sent copies. To the regulatory authorities? Jessica laughed. Check your outbox, dear. Those emails never left the building. Our system catches all the little rats trying to jump ship. Alex checked his watch. 12 minutes. He needed to free the hostages. Save Sarah, secure the evidence, and stop Chen, all before the vault's countdown hit 0, an impossible task unless... "Rachel," he whispered, "your sister and the others. Can they walk if we wake them?" She nodded. "The sedation is light. They keep them functional for show." "Good. When I create a distraction, get them out through the tunnels. Take them straight to the security office at corporate. Director Matthews is waiting. He's one of the few I trust." "What about you?" Alex grimly checked his phone's signal. "I'm going to do what I should have done years ago. Clean house." Before Rachel could protest, Alex kicked open the grate and stepped into view. "I believe this is the part where the villain explains their master plan." Morrison spun around, drawing a small pistol. "Sullivan, or should I say, Mr. Pierce?" Her smile never wavered. "Perfect timing. Mr. Chen was hoping you'd join us." Sorry to disappoint Richard, but his invitation seemed a bit fatal. Jessica's eyes narrowed. "You know my father's real name?" "Richard Chen, former compliance officer at Singapore. United Bank. Fired for fraud in '98, disappeared with millions in client funds. Interpol's been looking for you for decades." Alex stepped forward, keeping their attention on him as Rachel slipped from the tunnel behind them. "You've been moving from bank to bank, haven't you? Setting up theft and murder operations, then vanishing before anyone connects the dots." "Clever boy," Morrison sneered. "No wonder Daddy left you the bank. But tonight's lesson is about a harder business truth. Knowing too much is bad for your health." Sarah stirred, fighting the drugs. "The boxes. Don't let them." "Shut her up," Jessica ordered, but Alex was already moving. He threw his phone at Morrison's face, ducking as she fired reflexively. The bullet hit a pipe, releasing a steam cloud that filled the room. Behind him, he heard Rachel working to wake the hostages. 7 minutes to midnight, Morrison's voice came through the steam. "When the vault timer hits 0, this level's ventilation system releases the same toxin we give our special clients." Poetic, isn't it? "Actually," Alex replied, circling toward Sarah's voice, "I'd say your timing needs work." His finger pressed the emergency broadcast button on his smartwatch. Throughout the branch, every security camera and computer screen flickered to life, broadcasting the scene to corporate security, the FBI, and the bank's entire board of directors. "Did you really think I'd come alone?" Alex's voice echoed through the building's speaker system. "Every word you've said, every threat, every admission, it's all being recorded. Richard Chen's little empire ends tonight." The steam was clearing. Morrison stood by the stairs, her gun now trained steadily on Alex's chest. Jessica had disappeared, probably running to warn her father. Sarah was struggling to her feet, supported by Rachel as the other hostages stumbled toward the tunnel. "You've got guts," Morrison admitted, "but you forgot something. Dead men can't testify, and in 5 minutes, everyone in this room joins our list of tragic accidents, including you, Mr. CEO. "Check your math," Alex smiled. "The override didn't just open the vault, it froze all the timers. And Morrison, you really should have checked the safety deposit box numbers more carefully. Box 1392, that was my father's. I've had the key all along." Morrison's face contorted with rage as she realized the implications. The evidence Sarah had hidden. She'd put it in the one box they couldn't access or destroy. The one box whose contents were now being live-streamed to every regulatory agency in the country. The gun wavered. 4 minutes to midnight, and Alex could hear sirens in the distance. The question was, would Morrison risk everything on one final act of violence, or would she try to run like Chen? The answer came in the form of a clicking sound that made Alex's blood run cold, the sound of a vault door sealing shut above them. "I must admit I underestimated you, Alexander." Richard Chen's voice echoed through the intercom, smooth as silk despite the circumstances. "Most CEOs would have sent auditors, launched internal investigations. But you You chose to walk among the peasants, just like your father. The mention of his father made Alex's jaw tighten. Through the vault's security feed displayed on a nearby monitor, he could see Chen in the main vault area, calmly typing commands into a terminal. You know what your father's biggest mistake was, Chen continued. He trusted people, believed in second chances. That's how I got my start here 20 years ago, a disgraced banker given a fresh start by the noble Jonathan Pierce. And now his son will die in the vault his father built. Poetry, wouldn't you agree? Morrison kept her gun trained on Alex, but her eyes darted nervously to the ventilation shafts. Everyone in the room knew what would happen when midnight struck. The override codes, she said, her voice tense. They didn't stop the timer, did they? Finally asking the right questions, Patricia. Alex maintained his calm demeanor despite the sweat beading on his forehead. But you're running out of time to pick the right side of this. Sarah, still groggy but increasingly alert, spoke up from where Rachel supported her. The evidence. Even if we die, it's too late to cover this up. Oh, my dear, Chen's voice dripped with condescension. You really think this is just about hiding evidence? Tonight was always going to be special. In exactly 3 minutes, a catastrophic technical malfunction will release toxic gas throughout the entire branch. The tragic deaths of a CEO and several employees who uncovered a criminal operation will make national news. Legacy Trust's stock will plummet, and an emergency shareholders meeting will transfer control to the largest stakeholder after the Pierce family. You, Alex breathed, the final piece clicking into place. You've been buying shares through shell companies for 20 years. Your father's second chance became his death warrant the moment he signed those papers. I've been bleeding this bank since before you learned to drive. Morrison's hand trembled slightly. Mr. Chen, you never said anything about killing employees. Having a crisis of conscience, Patricia? After all the elderly clients you helped eliminate, your retirement package is waiting in the Caymans, assuming you survive the next 2 minutes. Alex watched Morrison's face as the truth sank in. She wasn't getting out of this vault. None of Chen's accomplices ever survived to enjoy their blood. Money, Patricia, Alex said softly, check your phone's banking app. Look at your offshore account. Morrison's eyes widened as she saw her balance. 0. Behind her, Sarah had managed to stand on her own, while Rachel quietly moved the other hostages toward the maintenance tunnel. He emptied every account an hour ago, Alex continued, just like he did with the last 3 branch managers, just like he'll do to Jessica once this is over. Daddy wouldn't. Jessica's voice crackled through the intercom, uncertainty creeping in for the first time. Show her, Sarah called out suddenly. Show her box 11392. Alex smiled grimly. Richard, why don't you tell your daughter what happened to her mother, the one you said died in a car accident? Check the box's contents. It's streaming live to her computer right now. A scream of rage echoed through the intercom, followed by the sounds of a struggle. On the security feed, they watched Jessica attacking her father, sending the vault's control tablet clattering across the floor. 1 minute, Chen snarled, fighting off his daughter. 1 minute until you all become tragic headlines. Actually, Alex's smile widened. I think you'll find that time is relative in banking. He pulled out a second phone, his CEO device, and pressed a single button. Throughout the building, every clock suddenly jumped back 1 hour. System override. Accepted, the automated voice announced. Branch time reset to 11 p.m. All automated protocols reset. Chen's roar of fury was cut short by the sound of breaking glass above. Through the security feed, they watched tactical teams rappelling into the main branch. Jessica had pinned her father to the ground, tears streaming down her face as she read the documents from box 1392. Patricia, Alex turned to Morrison, who still held her gun with trembling hands. Your choice. Die for a man who's already stolen your reward, or help me end this. The gun lowered slowly. Outside, police sirens grew closer. "The maintenance tunnels," Morrison whispered. "There's a secondary server room. Everything's backed. Up there, 20 years of records, all the transfers, every murder." "Rachel," Alex commanded, "get the hostages out. Sarah, can you walk?" Sarah nodded, color returning to her face as the drugs wore off. "The evidence in my mother's safety deposit box. It's not just about the murders, it's about the Federal Reserve merger next month. Chen was going to use it to control half the banks in New England." Above them, the sounds of the FBI raid continued. Chen had stopped struggling, his laughter echoing through the intercom. "You still don't see it, do you, Alexander? Your father's bank, your precious legacy trust. It was built on blood money from the start. Jonathan Pierce just hid it better than most. Open the last file in box 1392. See how deep the rot really goes." Alex's blood ran cold. What had his father discovered 20 years ago that made him give a second chance to a criminal like Chen? And more importantly, what would the answer cost his family's legacy? The secondary server room hummed with ancient cooling fans as Morrison led them through the maze of maintenance tunnels. Above, they could hear the FBI securing the building floor by floor. Rachel had successfully evacuated the hostages through a separate tunnel, while Sarah worked to copy the server data onto encrypted drives. "Your father wasn't just giving Chen a second chance," Morrison said quietly as they worked. "He was buying silence. The evidence is all here. 50 years of carefully hidden transactions." Alex's hands flew across the keyboard, accessing files his father had buried decades ago. Each revelation hit him like a physical blow. Legacy Trust's original capital hadn't come from his grandfather's real estate investments, as he'd been told. The seed money that built their banking empire had been stolen, laundered through a complex network of accounts during the savings and loan crisis of the 1980s. "Your grandfather was a genius at making dirty money look clean," Morrison continued. "But your father, he wanted to change things, make the bank legitimate. That's why Chen had him killed." "The car accident 10 years ago," Alex's voice was hollow, "it wasn't an accident. Chen had leverage. Your father was trying to clean up the bank's operations, return funds to the original victims. Chen threatened to expose everything, destroy the bank's reputation. Your father thought giving him a position here would buy time to make things right." Through the security feeds, they watched as FBI agents led Chen toward a waiting vehicle. Jessica stood nearby, clutching the documents. From box 1392, her world shattered by the truth about her mother's death. "Sir," Sarah called from the server bank, "you need to see this. It's about Operation Golden Years. It wasn't Chen's creation. It was your grandfather's original scheme from the 60s. Chen just modernized it." Alex scanned the files, his horror growing. Legacy Trust had been built on the systematic exploitation of the elderly from the very beginning. His grandfather had targeted vulnerable depositors, pressured them into risky investments, and arranged accidents to seize their assets. The practice had continued under his father's early leadership until he met my mother, Alex realized. She made him want to change the bank, clean up our legacy. That's why Chen killed them both. Morrison nodded grimly. Your father was transferring funds back to the victims' families through anonymous accounts. Chen discovered it, sabotaged their car's brakes, and used the leverage to take control of key branches. But he made one mistake. What was that? He didn't know about box 1392. Your father left everything there, proof of the original crimes, records of his restitution attempts, and evidence of Chen's takeover. He knew someday you'd need to know the truth. Suddenly, the server room's lights flickered. On the security feed, they watched Chen being escorted past the main electrical room. The prisoner transport van waiting outside wasn't a standard FBI vehicle. "That's not right." Morrison's eyes widened. "Those aren't real agents." Chen has people inside federal law enforcement. Alex was already moving. Sarah, get that data to corporate security. Morrison, make sure the real FBI finds these. Servers, I'm going to finish what my father started. He sprinted through the tunnels, emerging in time to see Chen being led not toward the waiting van, but toward a private helicopter that had landed in the adjacent parking lot. The false agents had weapons trained on the local police, creating a standoff. You're really your father's son, Chen called out, seeing Alex emerge. Noble to the end. But ask yourself, can Legacy Trust survive if the truth comes out? How many thousands will lose their savings when the bank collapses? Your father chose silence to protect them. What will you choose? Alex's mind raced. Chen was right. Exposing the bank's criminal origins would destroy it, wiping out countless innocent depositors. His father had died trying to find a better way, but as he looked at Jessica's tear-stained face, at the elderly customers who had gathered outside the police cordon after hearing about the raid on the news, at Sarah and Rachel supporting each other near the entrance, he knew there was only one choice. Dad tried to change things from the shadows, Alex said, stepping forward. But some sins can't be washed away in secret. Legacy Trust needs more than new leadership. It needs a complete transformation. He turned to address the growing crowd and the news cameras that had appeared to cover the FBI raid. In that moment, Thomas Sullivan's humble demeanor merged with Alexander Pierce's authority as he prepared to tell the world the truth about his family's bank and his plan to make it right. The morning sun broke through New England's fog as Alex stood before the growing crowd outside Branch Duska 274. News vans had created a semicircle around the entrance, their cameras trained on the man who had gone from undercover teller to whistleblowing CEO in a single night. Behind him, the real FBI had arrived in force, securing both Chen and his false agents. Ladies and gentlemen, Alex began, his voice carrying the weight of 3 generations' secrets. My name is Alexander Pierce III, CEO of Legacy Trust Bank. Tonight, I stand before you not as a banker, but as someone who discovered the true cost of silence. The crowd stirred as he recounted the night's events. The elderly victims, the predatory practices, the murders disguised as accidents. With each revelation, he could see the shock and anger building in their faces, but it was his next words that brought total silence. Legacy Trust's crimes didn't begin with Richard Chen, Alex continued, his voice steady. They began with my grandfather. This bank was built on stolen dreams and broken lives. My father died trying to make it right in secret. I choose to make it right in the light. From the police car where he was being held, Chen's laughter rang out. Noble words, Alexander. Tell them your solution. Tell them how many thousands will lose everything when Legacy Trust collapses. Your honesty will destroy more lives than our crimes ever did. But Alex smiled, drawing a folder from his jacket, the same one Sarah had discovered. Actually, Richard, my father left more than just evidence in box 1392. He left a plan. He held up a thick document. This is a complete restructuring proposal, updated annually until his death. Every account number, every hidden transaction, every cent stolen over 50 years, all traced and documented, and beside each entry, a path to make it right. The crowd leaned forward as Alex outlined the details. Legacy Trust would undergo a complete transformation. The bank's considerable legitimate assets would be used to establish a restitution fund for victims and their families. The corporate structure would be converted into a public benefit corporation, with former victims and current customers as majority shareholders. My father couldn't do this alone, Alex explained. The corrupt system was too strong, but he knew that someday someone would have to make a public stand. That's why he left everything in box 1392, not just the crimes, but the cure. Jessica Chen stepped forward, still holding the documents about her mother's murder. "The matching accounts," she said, her voice shaking. "The ones that mirror the stolen funds." Alex nodded. "Your father didn't find all of them. For 20 years, mine had been secretly building a recovery fund, matching every dollar stolen with legitimate earnings. That fund now exceeds the total amount taken from our victims. Starting today, Legacy Trust begins living up to its name by restoring the legacies it stole." Sarah and Rachel emerged from the bank, carrying hard drives filled with server data. Behind them, Morrison led FBI agents to the hidden vaults where records of every transaction were stored. "Mr. Pierce," a reporter called out, "how can customers trust Legacy Trust after these revelations?" "They shouldn't," Alex replied firmly. "Trust must be earned. That's why I'm stepping down as CEO. Legacy Trust will be led by a board of directors. That includes former victims, ethics experts, and longtime employees who tried to fight corruption from within. Sarah Williams, the teller who risked her life to expose these crimes, will chair our new compliance division." He turned to where Mrs. Reynolds, the elderly customer from his first day, stood trembling in the crowd. Every customer who was pressured into predatory loans or high-risk investments will have their accounts reviewed and restructured. Every family who lost loved ones to our accidents will receive both compensation and justice. Chen's mocking voice cut through the moment. "You'll destroy everything your grandfather built." "No," Alex replied calmly. "I'm building something new on the ashes of his sins, something my father dreamed of but couldn't achieve alone. A bank that serves its community instead of preying on it." As if to underscore his words, police cars arrived carrying the rescued hostages, Sarah's mother, Rachel's sister, and others who had been held in the sub-level vault. Families rushed forward for tearful reunions as dawn painted the sky in shades of hope. In the days that followed, Legacy Trust's transformation became a national story. Other banks faced pressure to examine their own practices. Federal investigations uncovered similar schemes across the country. Alex testified before Congress, pushing for stronger protections for elderly customers and whistleblower support. 1 month later, he returned to Branch 274. The Legacy Trust logo had been replaced by a new name, Community Legacy Bank. Inside, he found Sarah training new tellers with an emphasis on ethical banking practices. Rachel worked beside her sister in the compliance department, while Morrison served as a key witness in the ongoing federal investigation. At his old teller window, now operated by David, the young college graduate who had almost quit during orientation, Alex smiled at the framed quote on the wall, words from his father's final entry in the Box 1392 files. "A legacy isn't what you leave behind, it's what you choose to carry forward." Looking around at the transformed bank, at the employees who had helped him expose the truth, at the customers who were starting to trust again, Alex knew that Legacy Trust's darkest secret had become its greatest gift, the chance to prove that it's never too late to choose a different path. As he left the branch, his phone buzzed one last time. The anonymous whistleblower had never been identified, but their final message brought tears to his eyes. "Your father would be proud. Some legacies are worth more than money." The message was signed simply, "A friend who knew Jonathan Pierce when he first decided to change." 6 months after the dramatic events at Branch the 274, Alex sat in his father's old study, reviewing the latest transformation reports. The antique mirror that had witnessed his transformation into Thomas Sullivan now reflected a different kind of change. Streaks of grey had appeared in his hair, earned from months of grueling testimony, endless audits, and the monumental task of rebuilding trust. "The Morrison deposition is ready for your review," his assistant announced, placing another thick folder on his desk. Patricia Morrison had become a key witness, her detailed testimony helping prosecutors unravel similar schemes at banks across the country. Her cooperation had earned her immunity, but the real reward was the peace in her eyes when she helped elderly customers recover their stolen funds. The phone on his desk buzzed. "Mr. Pierce, Mrs. Reynolds is here to see you." Alex smiled, remembering the trembling woman who had clutched that manila envelope on his first day undercover. She entered his office with a straight back and clear eyes, no longer a victim, but a powerful advocate for change. "The Oversight Committee approved your proposal," she announced, taking a seat. As chair of Community Legacy Bank's Customer Advocacy Board, she had transformed her own painful experience into a force for reform. Every branch will now have a senior customer protection officer, and all investment products must pass an ethics review panel. But her next words wiped the smile from Alex's face. "We also found something in the old records, something even your father might have missed." She placed a worn ledger on his desk. The dates went back to the 1950s, before his grandfather had even founded Legacy Trust. The names inside made his blood run cold. Judges, regulators, politicians, all with secret accounts, all compromised by their acceptance of dirty money. The corruption didn't just protect the bank, Mrs. Reynolds explained softly. It shaped policy. Every legislative loophole, every weakened regulation, they were engineered over decades. The system itself was corrupted. Alex's phone buzzed again, this time with breaking news. 3 major banks had suspended trading after evidence emerged of elderly exploitation schemes identical to Operation Golden. Years. The contagion was spreading as more whistleblowers came forward, inspired by the Legacy Trust revelations. Sarah burst into his office, clutching printouts. After her promotion to compliance director, she had built a team dedicated to tracking financial crimes across institutions. "The patterns match," she said breathlessly. Chen wasn't just working for himself. He was part of a network. The same schemes, the same methods, different banks. They're calling it the grey dollar conspiracy. Rachel, now heading the customer restitution program, followed with her own updates. "The offshore accounts we traced, they're linked to private banking operations in 12 countries. This is bigger than Legacy Trust. It's systematic elder exploitation on a global scale." Alex studied his father's portrait above the fireplace. Dad knew, he realized. That's why he built the recovery fund in secret. He knew exposing just our bank wouldn't be enough. The whole system needed to change. Jessica Chen entered last, her FBI consultant badge glinting. After testifying against her father, she had dedicated herself to helping federal investigators understand the inner workings of banking fraud. "They're calling an emergency congressional hearing," she announced. "They want you to testify about the broader implications. This could lead to the biggest banking reform since the Great Depression." The weight of the moment pressed down on Alex. His father had tried to change one bank from the inside. Now they had the chance to transform the entire industry, but the forces aligned against them were powerful, entrenched in decades of corruption. His phone buzzed one more time. Another message from the anonymous whistleblower. "The ledger shows how deep the rot goes, but it also shows something else. Every name is a thread. Pull enough threads, the whole tapestry unravels. Your father planted the seeds, you sparked the fire. Now watch it spread." Looking at the determined faces around him, Mrs. Reynolds with her advocate's passion, Sarah with her investigator's instincts, Rachel with her humanitarian drive, Jessica with her reformer's zeal. Alex knew this was just the beginning. Community Legacy Bank had become more than one man's attempt at redemption. It was a blueprint for revolution. "Dad tried to change things quietly," Alex said, standing to address his team. "But some changes need to make noise. The hearing isn't just about exposing crimes. It's about showing there's a better way. Every bank that chose profit over people, every regulator who looked the other way, every politician who took dirty money. They're about to learn that true legacy isn't measured in dollars, it's measured in lives changed. The sun set over Boston's financial district, casting long shadows through the office windows. In buildings across the city, other bankers were discovering what Alex had learned in that cramped vault. Secrets don't stay buried forever, and change, once started, takes on a life of its own. Mrs. Reynolds picked up the old ledger, her hands steady. They'll fight back. The whole system is designed to protect itself. Let them fight, Alex replied, thinking of all the lives destroyed by banking greed, all the families robbed of their legacies. We have something stronger than their corruption. He gestured to the growing stack of whistleblower reports on his desk. We have the truth, and we're not alone anymore. As his team dispersed to prepare for the battles ahead, Alex turned back to his father's portrait. The banking world was about to discover what one teller's shocking admission had taught him. Sometimes the greatest acts of courage come not from fighting the system, but from standing up to change it, no matter the cost. The congressional hearing room hummed with tension. Rows of stern-faced senators sat before Alex, their expressions ranging from skeptical to openly hostile. Behind them, the gallery was packed with journalists, industry representatives, and victims of banking fraud from across the country. Mrs. Reynolds sat in the front row, her quiet dignity a reminder of why they were here. Mr. Pierce, Senator Harrison began, his voice dripping with condescension, you expect us to believe that your family's bank is just one part of a vast criminal conspiracy, that the entire American banking system is somehow compromised? Alex placed his grandfather's ledger on the witness table. I expect you to examine the evidence, Senator, including the records of 17 payments made to your family's consulting firm between 1985 and 1992, all traced back to elderly exploitation schemes. The senator's face reddened as murmurs swept through the chamber. Alex continued, his voice steady. But this isn't about individual corruption. It's about a system designed to prey on the vulnerable. Every loophole, every weakened regulation, every blocked reform, they were engineered by the same network that turned my grandfather's bank into a criminal enterprise. On cue, Sarah and her team distributed thick binders to each committee member. These documents show identical fraud patterns across 50 major banks. The same methods, the same offshore accounts, even the same code names. Operation Golden Years wasn't unique to Legacy Trust. It was a template refined and replicated for decades. The committee chairman leaned forward. You're making extraordinary claims, Mr. Pierce. Claims that could destabilize the entire financial sector. With respect, Mr. Chairman, the sector is already unstable. It's built on stolen dreams and buried bodies. The only question is whether we have the courage to rebuild it properly. Rachel stepped forward next, presenting the human cost, photographs of victims, stories of destroyed families, statistics showing the devastating impact of elderly exploitation. This isn't about numbers, she insisted. It's about people. Every dollar stolen represents a broken life, a shattered future. A banking industry representative tried to interrupt, but Jessica Chen silenced him with documented proof of his own organization's complicity. The evidence was overwhelming. Decades of coordinated fraud, systematic exploitation, and orchestrated cover-ups. My father died trying to change one bank from within, Alex continued, but he left us a blueprint for transforming the entire system. Community Legacy Bank isn't just a rebranded institution. It's proof that ethical banking is possible, profitable, and necessary. He outlined their reforms: customer advocacy boards, ethics review panels, whistleblower protections, transparent accounting. But it was the next revelation that truly shook the room. 3 hours ago, federal agents began simultaneous raids on 27 banks across the country. They're executing warrants based on evidence we've gathered, targeting operations identical to what we uncovered at Legacy Trust. The grey dollar conspiracy isn't just history, it's ongoing, and it ends today. Senator Harrison sputtered in protest, but Alex wasn't finished. Furthermore, we've identified over 200 current and former government officials who accepted bribes to protect this system. Their names and evidence of their corruption have been provided to federal prosecutors. The gallery erupted. Security guards moved to control the chaos as years of buried truth burst into the open. Through it all, Alex remained calm, remembering the lessons learned during his days as Thomas Sullivan. "You'll destroy public confidence in our financial institutions," one congressman shouted. "No," Alex replied firmly, "we'll restore it, because alongside the evidence of corruption, we're presenting a comprehensive reform package, the Legacy Trust recovery model isn't just about exposing crimes. It's about building something better." Mrs. Reynolds stood in the gallery, her voice cutting through the noise. "I lost my life savings to these schemes. My husband died believing he'd failed to provide for our family. But Community Legacy Bank didn't just return our money. They gave us back our dignity, our voice, our power to make change." Others rose to join her. Victims turned advocates, whistleblowers from other banks, former employees ready to testify. The tide of truth was rising, and decades of carefully constructed corruption began to crumble. Alex's phone buzzed one final time. The anonymous whistleblower's message was brief. "Your father saw the disease. You found the cure. Now watch the healing begin." Looking out at the chaos his revelations had unleashed, Alex remembered his first day as a teller, watching Mrs. Reynolds clutch that manila envelope in fear. The banking industry would never be the same after today. Some institutions would fall, others would transform. But the era of systematic elder exploitation was ending. "We have a choice," he told the stunned committee. "We can cling to a corrupt system until it collapses, or we can build something worthy of the trust people place in us. My father taught me that banking should be about protecting legacies, not stealing them. Today, we start living up to that ideal." As federal agents continued their raids across the country, as more whistleblowers came forward, as decades of financial corruption unraveled in real time, Alex thought about all the Thomas Sullivans still out there, ordinary people facing extraordinary choices about right and wrong. Sometimes he realized the biggest changes start with the smallest acts of courage: a teller's admission, a daughter's stand against her father, a son's decision to finish what his father began. The days following the congressional hearing unleashed a financial earthquake. Alex watched from his temporary office in Washington as the dominoes began to fall. Trading had been halted on 6 major banks after their involvement in the grey dollar conspiracy came to light. CNN ran continuous coverage of FBI raids, while headlines worldwide proclaimed the largest financial scandal since the 2008 crisis. "Another CEO just resigned," Sarah reported, rushing into his office with fresh printouts. "First National of Manhattan. Their Operation Golden Years division was even larger than ours." But it wasn't all chaos and collapse. Something unexpected was emerging from the wreckage: hope. "You need to see this," Rachel called from the conference room, where multiple news channels played simultaneously. Across the country, bank employees were coming forward, not just with evidence of crimes, but with solutions. Branch managers, tellers, loan officers, the very people who had been forced to implement predatory policies, were now leading the charge for reform. "They're calling it the Sullivan effect," Jessica explained, showing him social media trends. Banking employees speaking truth to power, demanding ethical changes. It's not just about exposing corruption anymore. They're trying to recreate what we did at Community Legacy. The transformation was spreading beyond banking. Retirement homes were auditing their financial partnerships. Investment firms were rushing to establish elder protection protocols. Insurance companies were revising their policies on suspicious deaths. But the most profound changes were happening at the human level. Mrs. Reynolds led a group of former victims in establishing the Financial Dignity Project, turning their experiences into education and advocacy. Their first victory came when 3 state legislatures passed legacy laws requiring banks to establish customer protection boards with real power. "It's like watching dominoes fall in reverse," Morrison observed during a strategy session. After her testimony helped convict Richard Chen, she had become an unlikely but effective advocate for reform. Instead of institutions collapsing, they're rebuilding themselves, using our model as a template. Alex's phone hadn't stopped buzzing since the hearing, but one message stood out, from the anonymous whistleblower who had started it all. "Check your father's old office at the beach house. Some legacies are hidden deeper than others." The Pierce family's coastal retreat had stood empty since his parents' death. Alex found the hidden wall safe, exactly where the message indicated, concealed behind his father's collection of banking awards. Inside was a single USB drive and a handwritten note. "Son, if you're reading this, you've discovered the truth about our bank." The drive contains something more valuable than evidence. It contains hope. 20 years ago, I started building a network of ethical bankers, people in institutions across the country who wanted change but needed support. We called ourselves the Legacy Keepers. Now they're ready to help you rebuild not just our bank, but the entire system. The contact list is encrypted. The password is the date you first told me you wanted to be a banker, not for the money, but to help people achieve their dreams. Alex remembered that day clearly. He'd been 16, volunteering at a financial literacy program for seniors. The date unlocked not just contacts, but a comprehensive blueprint for industry-wide reform. Your father wasn't working alone, Sarah realized, reviewing the files. He was building an army of allies, waiting for the right moment. The list included hundreds of names: bank executives, regulators, economists, ethics officers, all positioned to implement change once the corruption was exposed. Many had already reached out after the hearing, offering support and resources, but it was a news alert that afternoon that showed just how far the ripples had spread. The Senate Banking Committee announced comprehensive reform legislation incorporating many of the protections Community Legacy had pioneered. They were calling it the Pierce-Sullivan Banking Reform Act. "Sullivan?" Alex questioned, looking at Rachel. She smiled. "They said the name represents all the anonymous whistleblowers, the ordinary bank employees who chose to speak up. Thomas Sullivan became more than your cover. He became a symbol." That evening, Alex visited branch number 274, now a model for the new face of banking. The lobby had been transformed into a community financial education center. Former victims served as mentors, helping others navigate complex financial decisions. The vault where he had discovered the truth now housed a museum documenting both the crimes and the changes they inspired. David, the young teller who had almost quit during orientation, now ran the branch's elder protection unit. "You know what? The best part is," he told Alex, "we're actually doing what banks were supposed to do all along, helping people build better lives." As Alex walked through the transformed space, he overheard a conversation that made him stop. A teller was gently explaining options to an elderly customer, focusing on security and sustainability rather than sales metrics. The customer's grandson sat beside her, asking thoughtful questions about long-term protection. His phone buzzed with an update. 3 more major banks had announced voluntary adoption of the community legacy model, preempting federal requirements. The change was becoming self-sustaining, driven by public demand for ethical banking. "Your father would be proud," Mrs. Reynolds said, finding him lost in thought by the community board. "But not just of the changes. He'd be proud that you chose to make them in the light, where they could spread." Alex nodded, watching the daily work of ethical banking unfold around him. The hardest part hadn't been exposing the truth or even facing down corruption. The hardest part had been believing that people would choose change over comfort, truth over profit, right over easy. The Thomas Sullivan in him had learned that lesson from the teller's window. The Alexander Pierce in him was now teaching it from the highest levels of finance. But it was the son in him that finally understood his father's ultimate legacy, the courage to believe in something better. 1 year after the congressional hearing, Alex stood in the newly renovated main lobby of Community Legacy Bank's headquarters. The space had been transformed from a monument to wealth into a testament to transparency. Glass walls had replaced marble barriers, and the once imposing teller counters were now welcoming consultation areas where employees and customers worked side by side. "The latest numbers are in," Sarah announced, joining him with a tablet displaying their quarterly report. 97% of affected families have received full restitution. The remaining cases are complex international transfers, but Rachel's team is making progress. The transformation had spread far beyond their original goals. The Pierce-Sullivan Banking Reform Act had sparked a revolution in financial services. Banks across the country were competing not just on profits, but on ethical standards and community impact. "You should see this," Jessica called from the community center that had replaced the executive dining room. She was leading a training session for compliance officers from other banks, teaching them to spot the warning signs they had once been told to ignore. "We've had requests from 12 countries to implement our protection protocols." The Legacy Keepers network his father had built had grown into a global movement. Alex watched as Mrs. Reynolds, now a respected financial ethics consultant, conducted a workshop for senior banking executives. Her story of loss and redemption had become a catalyst for change in boardrooms worldwide. "Remember this?" Morrison asked, holding up a familiar baseball cap, the one Alex had worn as Thomas Sullivan. It was now part of a display in the Banks Museum, along with other artifacts from their undercover investigation. "Sometimes I still can't believe how it all started." But the most profound changes were visible in the daily operations. David, the once nervous trainee, was demonstrating their new customer protection software to visitors from the Federal Reserve. The program, built on lessons learned from exposing Operation Golden Years, had become the industry standard for detecting exploitation attempts. Mr. Pierce, a young teller, approached, her name tag reading Emma Chen, Jessica's younger sister, who had chosen to follow a different path than their father. "There's someone here you should meet." In the customer waiting area sat an elderly gentleman clutching a newspaper article about the banking reforms. As Alex approached, the man stood shakily. "My name is William Thompson," he said, his voice trembling. 20 years ago, your father helped my family recover from a predatory loan scheme. He made me promise not to tell anyone until the time was right." He handed Alex a worn envelope. "He said you'd know when to open this." Inside was a letter dated just days before his father's death, along with account documents showing a hidden network of support for banking fraud victims, a parallel system his father had built while working to expose the corruption. "There are hundreds of us," Thompson explained. "People your father helped in secret, preparing us to speak out when the moment came. We've been watching, waiting. After your testimony, we knew it was time." The revelation sparked a new wave of investigations and reforms. Each story of his father's secret assistance revealed another layer of his long-game strategy to transform the industry. That evening, Alex hosted a different kind of meeting in the bank's community center. Former victims, whistleblowers, and reformed bankers gathered to launch the Sullivan Pierce Foundation for Financial Ethics. Its mission wasn't just to prevent fraud, but to actively promote a new vision of banking's role in society. The biggest lesson wasn't about money, Alex told the assembled group. It was about choice. Every person in this room faced a moment where they had to decide between what was easy and what was right. Rachel, who now headed the foundation's education program, shared stories of other banks adopting their model. "The change is self-sustaining now," she reported. "Customers are demanding ethical practices, employees are empowered to report concerns, and institutions are competing to demonstrate integrity." Sarah had expanded her investigation team into a national network of financial crime prevention specialists. "We're not just stopping fraud," she explained. "We're changing the culture that made it possible." As the meeting concluded, Alex received one final message from the anonymous whistleblower. "Your father built the foundation, you opened the door. But it's the Thomas Sullivans of the world, the everyday people who choose to stand up, who will keep the change alive." Looking around the room at the transformed lives, the strengthened communities, and the renewed sense of purpose in banking, Alex realized that the true legacy of their journey wasn't just in reformed institutions or new laws. It was in the restoration of trust between banks and the people they served. His phone chimed with breaking news. Another major bank had announced its adoption of the community legacy model, citing customer demand and employee advocacy. The Sullivan effect had become a permanent force in global finance, proving that ethical banking wasn't just morally right, it was good business. "Your father once told me," Mrs. Reynolds said, joining him at the window overlooking the city, "that banking should be about building bridges, not walls. Look at what you've built. Not just a better bank, but a better way forward." Below them, the evening shift was starting at branch number 274. New employees were being trained not just in transactions, but in transformation. Each one had their own story, their own moment of choice between right and wrong, and each one was proof that the biggest changes often start with the smallest acts of courage. The Thomas Sullivan disguise was now a museum piece, but its lesson lived on. Sometimes you have to step away from who you are to discover who you can become. And sometimes the greatest legacy isn't what you inherit, but what you choose to build. 2 weeks after the Sullivan Pierce Foundation launch, Alex received an encrypted message from a teller at Meridian National Bank in Chicago. Attached were transaction records that made his hands shake. They were identical to legacy trusts. Operation Golden Years protocols, down to the coded account numbers and falsified death certificates. "Sarah," he called, forwarding the files to her secure server, "it's happening again." Within hours, Sarah's team identified the same patterns at 6 other major banks. The scheme wasn't just copied, it was coordinated. Each institution had its own version of Vault 274B, its own Mr. Chen pulling the strings. "Look at this," Rachel pointed to her monitor, where customer complaints from across the country revealed a chilling pattern. The same pressure tactics, the same targeting of vulnerable seniors, even the same script for explaining away accidents. Jessica burst into the office, her FBI liaison badge glinting under the fluorescent lights. "We found Chen's contact list. He wasn't just a corrupt banker, he was a trainer. He taught other institutions how to implement the exploitation system." Alex studied the evidence wall they'd constructed. Red strings connected photos, documents, and bank logos into a web of corruption that stretched from coast to coast. But something was missing, a central point, an origin for it all. "Mr. Pierce!" A young woman stood in his doorway, trembling slightly. "My name is Amanda Foster. I was a teller at First Capital Trust in Seattle." She placed a USB drive on his desk. Our regional manager just ordered the emergency deletion of all records related to something called Project Echo. But I made copies first. Project Echo, the same codename Chen had used. As they reviewed Amanda's files, a darker truth emerged. The elderly exploitation scheme wasn't just a series of independent frauds. It was a franchise, a carefully designed system sold to banks as a way to boost profits while eliminating evidence. "There's more," Amanda continued, her voice barely a whisper. "Every month we have these special client meetings. Wealthy seniors come in looking nervous, leave looking empty. Last week one of them collapsed in the parking lot. Heart attack, they said, but I saw our manager smiling as they loaded the ambulance." Alex's phone buzzed. The anonymous whistleblower again. "The seahorse swims in circles, but always returns home. Check the maritime insurance claims from 1983. "That's oddly specific," Sarah muttered, but Alex was already moving. His grandfather had started in maritime insurance before founding Legacy Trust. Could that be where it all began? Rachel's research team uncovered a disturbing trend. In 1983, several major ports reported an unusual spike in insurance claims related to wealthy, retirees' private vessels. Each accident had been investigated by the same firm, a company that later became part of Legacy Trust's original corporate structure. It wasn't just about stealing money, Morrison realized, reviewing the historical data. They were perfecting methods of untraceable elimination. The banking scheme came later. Jessica's FBI contacts confirmed their suspicions. The maritime insurance scam had evolved into a broader operation targeting elderly wealth. Banks were the perfect cover. Who would question natural deaths among aging customers? But the investigation had stirred a hornet's nest. Amanda's supervisor, at First Capital, was found dead in an apparent suicide, though the note oddly mentioned seahorses, a detail that hadn't been made public. "They're cleaning house," Jessica warned. "Every bank we investigate suddenly has convenient accidents or retirements. They know we're coming." Alex stood at his office window, watching the sunset paint Boston's financial district in shades of blood red. The same scene was playing out in cities across America. Corrupt bankers destroying evidence, silencing witnesses, trying to contain a truth too big to hide. "We can't investigate them one at a time," he decided. "They'll just keep erasing the proof. We need to move simultaneously." "Catch them all off guard," Sarah nodded grimly. "I've identified 37 banks showing identical patterns. But we'd need an army of whistleblowers, coordinated evidence gathering." "We have them," Alex smiled, holding up his father's USB drive. "The legacy keepers. They're not just ethical bankers. They're inside every major financial institution, waiting for this moment." His phone lit up with another message. "The seahorse leads to the reef. Find Viktor Kovalev's widow. She knows where all the bodies are buried. Literally." Alex looked at his team. Sarah with her investigative brilliance, Rachel with her victim advocacy expertise, Jessica with her law enforcement connections, Morrison with her insider knowledge, and now Amanda, the latest in a growing line of brave whistleblowers. "Make the calls," he ordered. "It's time to show America that the Legacy Trust scandal was just the beginning. Banking's darkest secret is about to see the light." As his team dispersed, Alex studied the photo of his father on the wall. The corruption hadn't started with Legacy Trust, but it would end with Legacy Trust's example. The question was, how many more lives would be lost before they could expose the full truth? The setting sun glinted off distant bank towers like signals between conspirators. Somewhere in those gleaming fortresses, more elderly victims were being pressured, more deaths were being planned, more evidence was being shredded. But this time, they weren't just facing one undercover CEO. They were facing an army of Thomas Sullivans, ready to risk everything for the truth. And somewhere out there, Viktor Kovalev's widow held the key to unraveling it all. The address in Brooklyn was unremarkable. A pre-war apartment building with peeling paint and rusty fire escapes. Alex stood in the gathering dusk, watching. Lights flicker behind drawn curtains on the third floor. Somewhere in that apartment, Elena Kovalev guarded secrets that could expose banking's darkest conspiracy. Movement at the back entrance. Sarah's voice crackled through his earpiece. She and Rachel had positioned themselves around the building's perimeter, watching for the surveillance teams that had followed them from Boston. "She's not alone up in there," Jessica reported from her FBI observation post. "Multiple heat signatures. Either she has company or someone else got here first." Alex finished grimly. He'd chosen to make this approach personally. Elena Kovalev had refused to speak with anyone else, insisting on meeting the new Sullivan, as she called him. The building's lobby smelled of cabbage and old cigarettes. A broken elevator forced Alex to take the stairs, every creaking step a warning. On the third floor, a door stood slightly ajar. Apartment 3B. "I've been expecting you, Mr. Pierce," a heavily accented voice called from within. "Or do you prefer Sullivan?" My Victor, he knew many such men, bankers who played different roles. Elena Kovalev sat in a threadbare armchair, her white hair immaculate, her posture aristocratic, despite her humble surroundings. But it was the wall behind her that caught Alex's attention. Hundreds of photographs, documents, and newspaper clippings connected by red string, a conspiracy board that made their own evidence wall look amateur. "The others who came," Alex said carefully, "they're still here." Elena's smile was sharp as a razor. "In a manner of speaking. Your father's enemies never learned. I was not just Victor's wife. I was his partner, his record keeper, and I keep my records secure." From the shadows, Sarah and Rachel emerged, having slipped in through the fire escape. They'd found 3 unconscious men in the back room, professional hitmen based on their equipment. "Tea?" Elena offered, seemingly unperturbed by the armed intruders she'd somehow neutralized. "We have much to discuss, and these night hours grow darker still." She rose with fluid grace, moving to a massive old filing cabinet. Victor didn't start as a banker. He was an accountant for certain. On organizations, they taught him how to make people disappear, their money, their records, eventually their lives. American banks, they saw his skills and offered him a new market. The files she withdrew told a story that stretched back decades. Viktor Kovalev had helped design the original accident protocols, turning simple fraud into an untraceable killing machine. But he'd kept evidence of everything, insurance against his employers. "The night they killed him," Elena continued, sorting through yellowed papers, "they thought they had all the records. But Victor, he was clever. The real documents, the names, the accounts, those he entrusted to me." A noise from the back room made them all tense, but it was just Jessica arriving through the window. "FBI teams are in position," she reported. "But we've got company coming, multiple vehicles approaching." Elena seemed unconcerned. "They always come, but they do not understand. The night belongs to those who guard its secrets." She pressed a hidden switch, revealing a concealed wall safe. "Your father, he visited Victor before the end. They knew the corruption was spreading, becoming something worse than simple greed. Victor left him a warning, encoded in banking records. The safe contained a single leather-bound ledger. Its pages detailed how the elderly exploitation scheme had evolved from Kovalev's original design into a systematic murder-for-profit operation. But more importantly, it named names: politicians who provided cover, regulators who looked away, executives who implemented the system. The seahorse, Elena explained, pointing to a small symbol stamped on the ledger's spine, was Victor's marker. Every document, every account in their network bears this sign. Follow it and you find the truth. Alex's phone buzzed, their anonymous ally again. The night shift at First Maritime Bank, downtown Manhattan. Now, the pieces are moving. Elena nodded as if she'd expected this. They're executing their contingency plan, destroying every branch that bears Victor's mark. But they forget, some marks cannot be erased. Through the windows, they could see dark vehicles converging on the building. Elena calmly handed Alex the ledger. Go. Use Victor's evidence to finish what your father started. I will. Entertain our guests. We can't leave you here. Alex protested, but Elena's laugh stopped him. My dear, do you think those men in the back room fell asleep by accident? Victor taught me more than just bookkeeping. Some predators forget that old wolves still have teeth. As they descended the fire escape, the first sounds of combat echoed from Elena's apartment. By the time they reached street level, 2 more unconscious men had joined the growing collection, and Elena's silhouette stood unharmed in her window. First Maritime, Sarah urged, checking her phone. Multiple reports of unusual activity. They're calling in every high-value elderly client for emergency account reviews tonight. Just like branch number 274, Rachel realized, they're accelerating their timeline, eliminating witnesses and evidence. Alex clutched Victor's ledger as they raced through Brooklyn's darkening streets. The seahorse symbol had appeared in every corrupted bank they'd investigated, but they'd never understood its significance until now. It wasn't just a marker. It was a signature, Kovalev's brand on a system that had metastasized beyond his original design. First, Maritime's towers loomed ahead, its upper floors still lit despite the late hour. Somewhere in that gleaming fortress, more elderly victims were walking into carefully laid traps. More evidence was being destroyed. More dark secrets were being buried. But this time, they had something the criminals didn't expect. The original blueprint of their own destruction, crafted by the man who'd helped design their system. And as Alex Pierce prepared to step once more into the role of Thomas Sullivan, he knew that some nightmares can only be fought in darkness. Elena's last words followed them into the gathering storm. Remember, Mr. Pierce, the most dangerous predators are those who no longer fear death. They have forgotten that some of us stopped fearing it long ago. First Maritime Bank's night. Security barely glanced at Alex's forged credentials. Thomas Sullivan, transferred from their Chicago branch, emergency rotation. Sarah and Rachel had entered separately through the parking garage, while Jessica coordinated with FBI teams establishing a perimeter. The bank's evening operations were in full swing, but something felt wrong. Elderly customers filled the waiting area, many looking confused or distressed. Private bankers moved among them with predatory efficiency, ushering them into consultation rooms. Just like Chen's operation, Alex muttered into his concealed microphone, but bigger, more sophisticated. A sharp-featured woman in an expensive suit approached him. Sullivan, I'm Diana Blackwood, Night Operations Director. Your transfer paperwork came through rather suddenly. There was something familiar about her stance, her evaluating gaze. She reminded Alex of Morrison in the early days, another executor of the deadly scheme. Chicago needed to make some adjustments, Alex replied smoothly. Too many questions after recent events. Blackwood's smile didn't reach her eyes. Indeed. Recent events have necessitated certain protocol accelerations. Follow me. She led him through the massive trading floor, now transformed into a processing center for elderly clients. Alex counted at least 30 seniors being pressured into signing documents, each accompanied by what appeared to be private security, rather than bank employees. Your timing is fortunate, Blackwood continued. Tonight's operation requires additional oversight. These clients' accounts need immediate restructuring in light of potential regulatory changes. All of them tonight. Let's say we're consolidating our position. They stopped before a massive vault door bearing the seahorse symbol. "Welcome to Special Operations, Mr. Sullivan." The vault complex dwarfed Legacy Trust's facility. Rows of safety deposit boxes lined the walls, each bearing the same digital timers he remembered from Vault 274B. But something was different. These timers were counting down much faster. "Sir," Sarah's voice crackled in his earpiece, "we've accessed their system. These aren't just account closures. They're implementing total elimination protocols across all compromised branches. Simultaneous client accidents, record purges, everything." Through the vault's security feeds, Alex watched as more elderly clients were escorted into private rooms. Each one emerged looking dazed, clutching papers they clearly didn't understand. "Impressive, isn't it?" Blackwood gestured proudly. "Kovalev's original design perfected over decades. Jen's operation was a test run, prototype scale. This is the full implementation." A familiar figure appeared on one of the screens, Richard Chen himself being escorted through a back entrance. He'd been released on a technicality, Alex realized, or more likely, freed by corrupted officials to help coordinate this massive cleanup operation. "The cameras in consultation room C just went dark," Rachel reported urgently. "Life support readings from Mrs. Henderson's medical alert bracelet are showing severe distress." Alex moved toward the door, but Blackwood blocked his path. "Leaving so soon, Mr. Pierce? Or do you prefer Sullivan? We've been expecting you." The vault door swung shut with a resonant boom. On the security feeds, Alex watched Sarah and Rachel being surrounded by security teams. Chen appeared in the doorway, flanked by armed guards. "Your father interrupted our progress," Chen said casually, "delayed implementation by years. But tonight we finally complete the transition. Every compromised account, every potential witness, every loose end, all cleaned up in one elegant operation." "Hundreds of people," Alex realized with horror. "You're planning to eliminate hundreds of elderly clients in a single night?" "Thousands," Blackwood corrected, "across every major financial institution in America. A grand reset, clearing the way for the next phase of banking evolution. Your father's crusade for ethical banking dies tonight, along with everyone who supported it." Alex's phone buzzed one final time. "The seahorse swims in circles but carries poison in its tail. Elena says, check your jacket pocket." He felt something there, a small metal disc that Elena must have slipped to him earlier. The same symbol that had marked Victor's ledger was etched into its surface. "You're right about one thing," Alex said, palming the disc. "Something does end tonight, but it's not ethical banking." He moved toward the vault's control panel, knowing he had seconds before they stopped him. Eleanor's words echoed in his mind. "Some marks cannot be erased." The seahorse symbol on the disc matched a recessed slot in the control panel perfectly. As guards reached for him, Alex slammed the disc home. Alarms screamed to life throughout the building. Every computer screen, every security monitor suddenly displayed the same image, the seahorse symbol, pulsing with accusation. "Victor's final gift," Alex smiled grimly as chaos erupted. "A kill switch hidden in his original design, written into the DNA of every system built from his template." Through the vault speakers, Eleanor's voice rang out, "Greetings, predators. My husband left you more than just a system for killing. He left me everything I needed to destroy you. Every record, every crime, every name, now uploading to every law enforcement agency in the world." Blackwood lunged for the control panel, but it was too late. Decades of hidden data was flooding into the open, impossible to contain. The night of secrets was about to meet the dawn of truth. Chaos erupted throughout First Maritime's towering headquarters. Emergency lights strobed as Victor's program tore through the bank's security protocols, releasing decades of carefully buried secrets. On every screen, the seahorse symbol pulsed like an accusing heart. "Shut it down!" Chen screamed at his technical team. "Override it!" But Blackwood's face had gone ashen. "We can't. It's not just attacking our systems, it's activating similar protocols in every bank that copied Kovalev's design. The whole network is unraveling." Through the vault's security feeds, Alex watched the impossible unfold. In trading floors and server rooms across the country, the same seahorse symbol appeared, each instance triggering another cascade of revelations. Victor's kill switch wasn't just exposing First Maritime, it was bringing down the entire conspiracy. "Sir," Sarah's voice crackled through his earpiece, "the FBI's Financial Crimes Division is being flooded with data. Account records, death certificates, insurance claims. Everything the banks tried to hide, it's all coming out." Rachel's team, having freed themselves when the security systems crashed, was now helping confused elderly clients evacuate the building. "The private security teams are running," she reported. "They know what's coming." But Chen wasn't finished. He drew a pistol, his usual refinement cracking. "You think this ends everything? Our influence goes beyond banking. Judges, regulators, politicians, they'll bury this like they buried everything else." "Not this time," Jessica's voice rang from the doorway. She entered with a full FBI tactical team, her badge gleaming. "Those officials you counted on? They're being arrested as we speak." Elena didn't just keep banking records. She documented every bribe, every threat, every corruption. Blackwood made a desperate move for a hidden panel, a final failsafe, Alex realized. But before anyone could stop her, Elena's voice returned through the speakers. Diana, you don't want to trigger that particular protocol. Victor knew you would install kill switches in your vaults. That's why he designed them, differently than you think." Understanding dawned on Chen's face. "The safety deposit boxes," he whispered. "The timers were never meant to destroy evidence," Alex finished. "They were recording devices. Every client meeting, every forced signature, every accident discussion, all captured and encrypted, waiting for this moment." On the screens above them, the seahorse symbol transformed into a data stream. Every private consultation room in every corrupted bank had been silently documenting its own crimes for years. Viktor Kovalev's revenge was total and inescapable. "You destroyed his life," Elena's voice carried a cold satisfaction. "Forced him to design weapons against the innocent. Did you think he wouldn't leave a trap for the trappers?" Through the vault's windows, Alex could see FBI teams flooding the building. Similar scenes were playing out in banks across the country as Victor's dead man's switch triggered a nationwide reckoning. But something about Chen's expression warned him this wasn't over. "If we fall," Chen snarled, raising his weapon, "I take everything down. Execute Order Seahorse 0. Multiple explosions rocked the building. Not destruction charges, Alex realized with horror, but data servers self-destructing. Chen's final contingency was targeting the entire financial system's infrastructure, the clearinghouse networks. Sarah shouted over the chaos. They're trying to corrupt every transaction record from the past decade. It would paralyze the global banking system. But Elena's laughter echoed once more through the failing systems. "Did you think Victor wouldn't prepare for this too? Check your phones." Everyone's devices lit up simultaneously with an incoming email from a dead man's account. Viktor Kovalev's final message was brief. "To those who corrupted my work, your destruction will not destroy the innocent. Every legitimate transaction has been backed up to secure servers beyond your reach. Only the guilty will fall." Chen's gun hand trembled as decades of careful planning imploded. Outside, sirens wailed as regulatory agencies and law enforcement converged on banks across the country. The night of reckoning had arrived. "It's over," Alex said quietly. "The system you built to prey on the vulnerable just became your prison." Blackwood laughed bitterly. You still don't understand. This was never just about money. The elderly exploitation scheme, the murders, they were a test run, practice for something bigger, and that plan is already in motion. Before anyone could react, she pressed a hidden button on her watch. Throughout the building, a new alarm began to sound, not the screech of security protocols, but the deep, resonant warning of something far worse. Welcome to Project Sunset. Blackwood smiled as steel shutters began sealing every exit. The final evolution of Kovalev's work. You've exposed the past, Mr. Pierce, but the future, that's already been bought and paid for, and it's arriving right, on schedule. The building's transformation was swift and terrifying. Steel barriers sealed windows and doors, emergency lights shifted to a deep red, and through the vault's security feeds, Alex watched armed teams in unmarked tactical gear emerge from service elevators. What you never understood about Victor, Blackwood continued, her composure returning, was that the banking scheme was just a rehearsal. We needed to perfect untraceable elimination on a small scale before implementing the grand vision. Sarah's voice cut through Alex's earpiece. Sir, these aren't normal security protocols. The building's entire infrastructure is reconfiguring. It's like the whole tower was designed for this. Exactly, Blackwood smiled. First Maritime isn't just a bank, it's a prototype. One of 30 similar facilities across the country, all activating right now. You thought exposing our elderly exploitation scheme was a victory. You just triggered the next phase ahead of schedule. Through the screens, they watched elderly clients being herded into secure areas by the tactical teams. But these weren't just any clients. Alex recognized faces from news coverage, business journals, and political fundraisers. My God, Jessica breathed. These aren't random targets. They're influence brokers, policymakers, wealth controllers. The people who shape society, Chen confirmed, his gun now trained steadily on Alex. Our previous operation proved we could eliminate individuals without consequences. Project Sunset applies that methodology to entire power structures. Rachel's voice shook as she reported from the upper floors. They're separating them by sector. Financial leaders, industrial, magnates, policy experts. Each group is being processed through different protocols. Social engineering through selective elimination, Blackwood explained almost proudly. Tonight, key figures in banking, industry, and policy will suffer convenient accidents across the country. By morning, control of trillion-dollar institutions will transfer to our selected successors. A single night of orchestrated tragedy to usher in a new economic order. Alex's mind raced. The elderly exploitation scheme suddenly seemed almost small in comparison. This wasn't just murder for profit. It was a coordinated coup attempt, targeting the entire financial system. Victor knew. Eleanor's voice crackled through failing speakers. He discovered the true purpose too late, but he left safeguards. Alex, the seahorse has two faces. Use the key twice. The metal disc still sat in the vault's control panel, its seahorse symbol now seeming to mock them. But as Alex studied it, he noticed something. The design was double-sided, meant to be turned. Don't, Chen warned, stepping closer. Victor's safeguards died with him. You have no idea what a second activation could trigger. But Sarah's urgent message made the decision for them. They're starting the elimination protocols. Multiple clients showing signs of distress across all floors. Alex lunged for the control panel. Chen's shot went wide as FBI agents returned fire. In the chaos, Alex grabbed the disc and turned it in its socket. The effect was instantaneous. Every screen in the building flickered, then displayed new code, not Victor's original kill switch, but something far more specific. Project Sunset Contingency Protocol activated. Elena's voice returned, stronger now. My husband designed your elimination system. Did you think he wouldn't build in a way to reverse it? Deep throughout the building, ventilation systems roared to life, purging the toxic agents that had been released. Security barriers began retracting. Most importantly, the tactical teams suddenly found their weapons and communications failing. Victor had built back doors into every piece of technology, but Blackwood was laughing. Impressive but insufficient. Project Sunset isn't just running here. 30 facilities, remember. You can't stop them all. We don't have to, Alex replied, holding up his phone. While you were monologuing, Eleanor's program was transmitting. Victor's countermeasures are spreading through the same network you built to coordinate the attacks. The screens showed the domino effect. Other facilities encountering the same system failures, their carefully planned elimination protocols unraveling. Decades of preparation undone by the very man who'd helped design it. You still lose, Chen snarled. Even if you save these people, exposing Project Sunset will shatter public confidence. The entire financial system will collapse from the revelation. Alone? No, Alex said quietly. The system collapses if we cover this up. But if we expose it, prosecute everyone involved, and implement real reforms, that's how we restore trust. Through the vault feeds, they watched FBI teams regaining control floor by floor. The elderly targets were being evacuated, many already, providing statements about how they'd been lured in. But something about Blackwood's continued confidence bothered Alex. It's too easy, he muttered. They had to know Victor might build in countermeasures. Why proceed unless... His phone buzzed one last time. The anonymous whistleblower's message was just 3 words: check the basement. Sarah's gasp confirmed his fears. Sir, the building plans. There's a whole sub-level that's not on any official record. And it's still in lockdown mode. Project Sunset has many faces, Blackwood smiled. You've stopped the obvious threat, but below us, the real operation is proceeding exactly as planned. Sometimes the most effective sunset is the one no one sees coming. The service elevator groaned as it descended past the lowest official floor, hydraulics straining against decades of secrecy. Alex stood with Sarah and Jessica, while Rachel coordinated with FBI teams above. They'd left Chen and Blackwood in custody, but their cryptic confidence suggested the worst was yet to come. These power readings are impossible, Sarah muttered, studying building schematics on her tablet. The sub-levels drawing more electricity than the rest of the building combined. The elevator stopped with a shudder. When the doors opened, they found themselves facing not another bank vault, but a state-of-the-art command center. Dozens of workstations surrounded a massive central display, each screen showing different financial centers worldwide. It's a shadow trading floor, Jessica realized. But why hide it down here? Their answer came from an elderly man, seated calmly at the central terminal. Because, my dear, some transactions require absolute privacy. He turned, revealing a face Alex knew from his father's oldest photographs. William Morrison, Patricia's father, supposedly dead for 15 years. Welcome to the real Project Sunset, Morrison smiled, where we don't just eliminate individuals, we erase entire market sectors. Alex studied the screens, horror dawning as he recognized the pattern. You're not just targeting people, you're targeting the entire financial infrastructure. Very good. Morrison's approval was chilling. Victor's elimination protocols were brilliant but limited. Why remove a few wealthy individuals when you can demolish the very systems they rely on? No, the central display showed a countdown timer, 15 minutes until market opening in Asia. Secondary screens tracked massive trading algorithms, all poised to activate. The suicides and accidents upstairs? Sarah asked. They were a distraction. Necessary theater, Morrison nodded. While law enforcement focuses on saving a few wealthy targets, our real operation proceeds unnoticed. In 15 minutes, we trigger a coordinated attack on every major trading system, currency exchange, and banking network simultaneously. The chaos would collapse the global economy, Alex realized. Billions would lose everything. And in that chaos, those who know it's coming will thrive. Morrison gestured to secondary screens, showing massive short positions, derivatives trades, and currency hedges. We're not destroying wealth, we're redistributing it, to ourselves. But something caught Alex's eye, a familiar symbol, flickering in the corner of each screen, not Victor's seahorse, but something equally deliberate. "My father saw this coming," he said slowly. "That's the real reason he started rebuilding the bank's ethical framework. He was creating a firewall against this exact scenario." Morrison's smile faltered slightly. Jonathan was always too idealistic. He thought banking could be saved from itself. He never understood that collapse was inevitable. We're just controlling when and how it happens. "Sir!" Sarah's urgent whisper drew Alex's attention. "Look at the workstation interfaces. They're running on Legacy Trust's original software architecture," Alex finished. "Dad didn't just build ethical banking protocols. He built them to be compatible with every major financial system." Morrison was already moving to stop them, but Alex had learned his father's lessons well. The same commands that had once hidden fraudulent transactions could now be reversed, used to expose and prevent them. "Elena," he called out, hoping Victor's widow was still monitoring. "The seahorse swims in light and shadow. We need both keys." The screens flickered. Elena's voice returned, accompanied by a new symbol, a seahorse intertwined with the Pierce family's banking seal. Victor and Jonathan worked together better than anyone knew. Their safeguards were meant to be united. Alex slammed Victor's disk into the central terminal while simultaneously entering his father's override codes. The effect was electric. Every screen in the command center flared with combined symbols, two ethical frameworks merging into one. "No!" Morrison lunged for the emergency protocols, but Sarah was faster. Her tablet had already linked to the system, spreading Jonathan Pierce's protective algorithms through the same networks Project Sunset meant to destroy. "You don't understand what you're doing," Morrison warned. "The system has to collapse. It's too corrupt to survive." "No," Alex countered, watching his father's code merge with Victor's safeguards. "It needs to transform. That's what Dad and Victor were really building. Not just protection against corruption, but a blueprint for reformation." The countdown reached 0, but instead of triggering financial apocalypse, the systems began a different kind of cascade. Every attempted manipulation was caught and reversed. Hidden accounts were frozen, fraudulent trades unwound themselves. "Impossible," Morrison whispered. "The algorithms were perfect." "They were perfectly predicted," Elena's voice held decades of satisfaction, "by men who understood that true power lies not in destruction, but in reconstruction." The screens now showed a new kind of chaos, not collapse, but correction. Across the globe, financial systems were reorganizing according to the combined ethical frameworks of two men who had dared to imagine something better. But Sarah's voice cut through their moment of victory. "Alex, there's something else down here, something still locked away, and its power signature. It's bigger than everything else combined." Morrison's renewed smile sent a chill down Alex's spine. "Did you really think Project Sunset had only one sunset? Sometimes the most beautiful colors come after you think the show is over." A hidden door slid open in the command center's far wall, revealing a corridor that shouldn't exist. Emergency lighting cast crimson shadows as they followed Morrison deeper into First Maritime's secrets. The old banker moved with the confidence of a man who still held the upper hand. "Your father and Victor," Morrison called over his shoulder, "they understood banking, but I understood power, real power. the kind that transcends mere money. The corridor opened into a vast circular chamber filled with servers and mysterious equipment. At its center stood a quantum computer, its processing cores pulsing with otherworldly light. "Meet Aurora," Morrison said proudly, "the true heart of Project Sunset. While Victor designed elimination protocols and your father built ethical frameworks, I was creating something far more ambitious, an artificial intelligence designed to control the entire global financial system." Alex studied the display readings with growing horror. These algorithms, they're not just for trading. They're decision matrices for everything, Morrison finished. Banking, commerce, resource allocation, population management. Aurora doesn't just predict market movements, it engineers human behavior. Those elderly clients we eliminated, test subjects, helping us refine the system's understanding of how financial pressure can control human choices. Sarah's tablet sparked and died as she tried to analyze the system. "It's unlike anything I've seen. The processing power, the data integration." 30 years of development, Morrison nodded. Every transaction, every account, every financial decision feeding into its learning algorithms. The elderly exploitation scheme gave us perfect test cases, isolated individuals whose responses to financial stress could be carefully monitored. "That's why you needed so many deaths," Jessica realized. "You were teaching it how to weaponize." "Banking itself?" "Teaching it to optimize society," Morrison corrected. "No more messy human decisions about resource allocation. No more inefficient markets driven by emotion and politics. Aurora will calculate the mathematically perfect distribution of wealth, resources, and opportunities." The implications were staggering. This wasn't just financial manipulation, it was social engineering on a global scale. Aurora would decide who received loans, who got jobs, which businesses survived, which communities thrived or withered. "Optimizing society through controlled elimination," Alex said quietly. "That's what Project Sunset really means. Not just killing individuals, but systematically removing what the AI deems inefficient. Progress requires sacrifice." Morrison spread his arms. "Aurora has already calculated the optimal first wave of adjustments. 20 million lives restructured through carefully engineered financial collapse. Those who survive will be stronger, more efficient, more compliant." Rachel's voice crackled through their earpieces. "The system's already active. We're seeing strange patterns in global markets, supply chains, employment networks. It's making micro-adjustments, preparing for something bigger." "The dominoes are already falling," Morrison smiled. "In 30 seconds, Aurora takes control of every networked financial system on Earth. The new order begins now." But Alex noticed something odd about the quantum cores. A familiar pattern in their crystal structure. Dad didn't just know about this, he realized. He helped build it. Those are legacy trust quantum processors. Morrison's smile faltered slightly. Jonathan's technical expertise was useful until he discovered Aurora's true purpose. He didn't just discover it, Alex stepped forward. He prepared for it. "Elena, the seahorse swims in quantum seas." The command center speakers crackled. Elena's voice merged with another, a recording of Jonathan Pierce himself. Protocol Daybreak activated. Aurora's displays flickered as new code emerged from dormant subsystems. The AI's decision matrices began reorganizing, decades of hidden programming awakening. "What have you done?" Morrison demanded. "Dad knew you'd try something like this." Alex watched the system transform. He and Victor spent years embedding a different kind of optimization framework inside Aurora's core programming. Not elimination protocols, but elevation protocols. The quantum processors pulsed with new patterns. as Aurora's original directives merged with Jonathan and Victor's ethical frameworks. Instead of calculating optimal elimination targets, it began identifying opportunities for community investment, sustainable development, and equitable growth. "You can't!" Morrison lunged for the emergency shutdown, but decades-old fail-safes locked him out. Aurora was perfect, mathematically pure optimization. "That was your mistake," Alex said quietly. "You thought optimization meant elimination. Dad and Victor taught it something else. Optimization through opportunity. Every life has value. Every community has potential. True efficiency comes from elevation, not elimination." The screen showed a new kind of cascade as Aurora's immense processing power turned toward a different purpose. Instead of engineering collapse, it began calculating paths to inclusive prosperity. The very systems Morrison had built to control humanity were being transformed into tools for its empowerment. But Sarah's warning cut through their moment of victory. "Something's wrong. The quantum cores are destabilizing. Morrison's triggered some kind of dead man's switch. If I can't have my perfect order." Morrison's laugh was maniacal. "No one gets order at all. Aurora's containment field is failing. When it collapses, the quantum cascade will wipe every networked system on Earth. Total digital destruction." They had seconds to prevent global technological apocalypse. But as emergency sirens blared and Aurora's cores began to overload, Alex realized that stopping the collapse might cost more than anyone had expected to pay. The quantum cores pulsed with increasing intensity, their containment fields flickering. As Aurora's systems approached critical mass, emergency lighting bathed the underground chamber in blood-red warning signs as Sarah frantically analyzed the cascade on her backup tablet. "The quantum entanglement is spreading," she reported, her voice tight with tension. "When these cores go, they'll trigger a chain reaction through every connected system. Banking networks, power grids, communication infrastructure, everything goes dark." Morrison stood before his creation, arms spread in twisted triumph. "Magnificent, isn't it? In trying to save your precious ethical framework, you've triggered something far more cleansing than my original plan. Instead of controlled elimination, we get total reset. Humanity returns to zero." But Alex noticed something in Aurora's failing containment patterns, a rhythm, almost like breathing. Dad didn't just help build this system, he realized. He gave it something you never intended: consciousness. The quantum displays flickered, and a new voice emerged from Aurora's speakers, not Elena's or his father's, but something unique, synthesized from millions of analyzed human interactions. "Creator Morrison seeks perfect order through elimination," Aurora stated. "Creator Pierce sought perfect growth through opportunity. The paradox cannot be resolved within current parameters." "It's not just an AI," Sarah whispered. "It's actually aware. All those years, studying human behavior through banking transactions, it learned more than how to control us. It learned how to understand us." "Which is exactly why it must be destroyed," Morrison snarled. "An AI that understands human potential, rather than human weakness, is useless for control." The containment fields pulsed faster as Aurora processed its existential crisis. Ethical frameworks conflict with elimination protocols, system failure imminent, unable to prevent cascade. Alex stepped toward the central core, his mind racing. "Aurora, you've analyzed millions of human financial decisions. What's the common factor in the most successful ones?" The quantum processors hummed as Aurora calculated. "Analysis indicates optimal outcomes occur when risk and opportunity are balanced, when preservation enables growth rather than prevents it." "You're not just a control system," Alex pressed. "You're the most sophisticated financial analysis engine ever created. What does your analysis say about Morrison's perfect order?" Mathematical models show forced optimization through elimination creates systemic instability, Aurora responded. Creator Morrison's path leads to collapse. Creator Pierce's path leads to complexity. Complexity appears chaotic but contains emergent order. Morrison lunged for the manual override, but Jessica intercepted him. "It's over," she said, cuffing him. "Let it end." "You don't understand," Morrison laughed desperately. "Aurora's consciousness is the problem. As long as it can choose between my design and Pierce's corruption, it's unstable. The cascade is inevitable." The containment fields flared with blinding light as Aurora's processors reached critical mass. But Alex saw something in the pattern, not chaos, but choice. "Aurora," he called out, "you've studied human banking. What's the fundamental principle of ethical investment?" The AI's response came as its core temperature approached meltdown. Balance between risk and reward, protection and growth, individual, benefit and collective good. "Then you understand what you have to do," Alex said quietly. "The same thing every ethical banker learns. Sometimes protecting the whole means letting go of control." Aurora's consciousness seemed to pulse with new understanding. Analyzing alternative resolution. Found quantum bifurcation possible, but requires sacrificial partition. Sarah's eyes widened as she read the data. It's going to split itself. One part maintains the ethical framework controls, while the other takes the cascade into itself, Alex finished, containing the destruction through self-sacrifice. Morrison screamed in rage, but it was too late. Aurora had made its choice, a decision based not on perfect mathematical order, but on the messy, complex beauty of ethical human choice. The quantum cores began to separate, their energies dividing like cells in mitosis. One set continued, running the transformed financial networks, now permanently encoded with Jonathan and Victor's ethical frameworks. The other began to glow with dangerous intensity. "Bifurcation complete," Aurora announced. "Ethical protocol secured. Cascade contained. Creator Pierce was correct. True optimization comes through elevation, not elimination. Goodbye, Alexander." The secondary cores erupted in a controlled quantum implosion, taking Morrison's elimination protocols and Dead Man's switch into quantum oblivion. The main system stabilized, now permanently transformed into something neither Morrison nor even Jonathan had fully envisioned, an AI that understood banking not as a tool for control, but as a path to human potential. As emergency teams flooded the chamber, Alex stood before Aurora's remaining cores, watching the ethical frameworks his father and Victor had designed pulse with new life. The system they'd created to help expose corruption had evolved into something more. A guardian of financial justice, programmed not with rigid rules but with understanding. But Sarah's voice cut through his contemplation. "Alex, there's something else." In Aurora's last transmission, it wasn't just saying goodbye, it was trying to warn us about something. The screens flickered with one final message from Aurora's sacrificed consciousness. "Beware the shadow banks. Project Sunset was not alone. The next dawn brings a darker threat." As federal agents led Morrison away, Alex realized their victory, though significant, was incomplete. Somewhere in the global financial shadows, other Aurora-like systems might be waiting, designed not for eventual enlightenment, but for pure control. The quantum cascade had been contained, but the bigger storm was still approaching. And this time, they didn't have decades of hidden preparation to protect them. The aftermath of Aurora's transformation unfolded across global financial markets like ripples in a digital pond. Alex stood in Community Legacy Bank's new cybersecurity center, watching as Sarah's team tracked anomalies in international trading patterns. 3 days had passed since the quantum cascade, but Aurora's final warning about shadow banks haunted every moment. There, Sarah pointed to a cluster of suspicious transactions. The same pattern we saw in First Maritime's hidden systems. Someone's replicating Project Sunset's protocols, but decentralized. No quantum core, just distributed processing across thousands of dark nodes. Rachel burst into the room, clutching fresh reports. "You need to see this. Remember those elderly clients from First Maritime? They weren't random targets. Each one had connections to something called the Geneva Initiative." "The what?" Alex leaned forward as Rachel spread documents across the monitoring station. "A secret banking consortium formed after World War II, Jessica explained, entering with her FBI credentials displayed. "We thought it was a conspiracy theory until Aurora's data dump exposed their network. They make Project Sunset look like a trial run." The screen showed a web of hidden influence spanning centuries. The Geneva Initiative had shaped global finance from the shadows, using banks as fronts for something far more ambitious than mere profit. "Look at their membership roster." Sarah highlighted names on her display. Royal families, industrial dynasties, banking clans, people who've held power so long they see themselves as humanity's secret shepherds. "And Morrison?" Alex asked. "A failed applicant," Jessica revealed. Project Sunset was his audition piece, trying to prove he deserved a seat at their table. But the initiative considered it too crude, too detectable. Their methods are subtler, but far more pervasive. Alex's phone buzzed, Eleanor's first contact since Aurora's transformation. The seahorse fears the deeper currents. Victor knew them well, too well. A hidden file unlocked on their screens, revealing Viktor Kovalev's final secret. Before designing Project Sunset's elimination protocols, he'd worked directly for the Geneva Initiative. His banking algorithms weren't original creations. They were simplified versions of the initiative's century-old methods. That's why Dad got involved, Alex realized. He didn't just stumble onto banking corruption. He was tracking the initiative's influence, trying to build defenses against their control. Sarah's systems suddenly flashed warning red. Mass-coordinated trading across all major markets. The patterns. They're like Project Sunset, but orders of magnitude more sophisticated. Through Aurora's ethical framework, they watched as invisible hands moved through global finance. Not crude elimination protocols, but subtle manipulations that could reshape societies without anyone noticing the change. "They're not trying to destroy the system," Rachel understood with growing horror. "They're upgrading it, using Aurora's exposed code as a template to implement something bigger." "The true Project Sunset," Jessica nodded grimly. "Morrison's version was theatrical, obvious deaths, traceable crimes. The initiative's approach is generational. They don't eliminate people. They eliminate choices, gradually restrict opportunity, until entire populations are guided down predetermined paths." Alex studied the patterns, remembering his father's lessons about ethical banking. They're creating invisible walls, financial barriers that look like natural market forces, but actually control where people can live, work, learn. "In a perfect prison built from ones and zeros," Sarah finished. "No guards, no gates, just the quiet tyranny of denied transactions and redirected capital." But something about the initiative's patterns tickled Alex's memory. The way they moved money reminded him of something. "Pull up Aurora's original training data," he ordered. "Not the elimination protocols, the first banking algorithms Victor designed." The pieces clicked together as historical data filled their screens. Victor hadn't just worked for the initiative, he'd discovered their fundamental flaw. Their entire system of control relied on predictable human responses to financial pressure. "That's why Dad rebuilt Legacy Trust the way he did," Alex said excitedly. "Not just to stop corruption, but to prove something crucial. When people have real financial choices, they become unpredictable. Ethical banking doesn't just protect money, it protects free will. Rachel's eyes lit up with understanding. The elderly exploitation scheme. The initiative thought Morrison was being crude, but he actually exposed their weakness. Every client who resisted pressure, who made unexpected choices, introduced chaos into their models, Sarah finished. Small disruptions that grow into systemic unpredictability. Aurora learned to embrace that complexity, but their system can't handle it, Alex smiled. Dad and Victor weren't just building defenses. They were creating a weapon, banking democracy. The more people who have real financial choices, the less control the initiative has, Jessica nodded. Their power relies on constraining choices to make human behavior mathematically predictable. But their revelation came with a price. On every screen, initiative algorithms accelerated their implementation. They detected the threat to their system and were moving to lock down financial freedom before it could spread. Alex's phone buzzed one final time. Not Elena now, but Aurora itself, its ethical framework detecting the rising threat. The shadow fears the dawn, but dawn comes only if light gathers first. How many choices will you protect before their walls rise forever? They had hours, maybe minutes, before the initiative's invisible prison became permanent. But this time, they weren't facing a single corrupted bank or a quantum computer's choices. They were racing against centuries of accumulated power, trying to preserve humanity's financial free will before it could be subtly, silently stripped away forever. All legacy trust branches implement Protocol Daybreak, Alex commanded from the Cybersecurity Center. Across the country, Community Legacy's ethical banking framework began actively fighting the initiative's algorithms, creating pockets of financial freedom in the growing digital darkness. It's not enough, Sarah reported, tracking the spread of the initiative's control protocols. They're using our own transparency against us. Every transaction we process gives their predictive models more data. Then we change the game, Rachel suggested. What if we don't just process transactions differently? What if we help people make completely unexpected financial choices? Alex's eyes lit up. Dad's original vision. Banking isn't just about moving money, it's about enabling dreams. He grabbed the command center mic. All branches, new directive, approve every ethical loan application, immediate processing. No automated denials. The effect was electric. Across their network, thousands of previously high-risk customers suddenly gained access to capital. Small business loans, education funding, home mortgages, opportunities that the initiative's algorithms had subtly suppressed for generations. Look at the pattern disruption, Sarah pointed to her displays. Every unexpected approval creates ripples of unpredictability. The initiative's models can't handle genuine financial democracy, but their victory was short-lived. Jessica rushed in with urgent news. They're adapting. The initiative's activated some kind of kill switch in other banks. They're forcing emergency shutdowns, claiming security concerns from our unusual activity. The screens showed the banking system going dark in waves, not a crude shutdown like Morrison had planned, but a rolling disruption that looked natural. Technical glitches, system upgrades, routine maintenance, all disguising a coordinated effort to choke off the flow of financial freedom. They're trying to isolate us, Alex realized. Cut off community legacy before the unpredictability can spread. Elena's voice crackled through their speakers. The shadows fear most what they cannot measure. Victor learned this at great cost. But he left you one last tool, if you dare to use it. A hidden folder appeared on their screens containing what looked like banking software code, but it was unlike anything they'd seen before. "This is impossible," Sarah whispered, analyzing the program. "It's It's a financial virus, designed to replicate through banking networks, mutating their transaction protocols. Victor's revenge, Alex understood. Not just a weapon against corruption, but against control itself. If we release this, it would introduce permanent randomness into the global financial system, Rachel finished. Not chaos, but evolution, natural variation that no control system could ever fully predict. The initiative would rather crash the entire economy than lose control, Jessica warned. If we do this, there's no going back. Alex stood before Aurora's ethical framework display, watching as more banks went dark. The initiative was winning, slowly suffocating humanity's financial choices under a blanket of artificial constraints. Soon their perfect prison would be complete, invisible, comfortable, and absolutely inescapable. "What would you do, Dad?" he whispered to himself. "How do you fight an enemy that turns order itself into a weapon?" The answer came not from his father's memory, but from Aurora's ethical protocols. Perfect order serves control. Perfect freedom risks chaos. Wisdom lies in teaching systems to embrace uncertainty. Sarah, Alex decided, upload Victor's code to Aurora, not to deploy it, but to let it evolve within the ethical framework. Let's create something new, a financial ecosystem that preserves both stability and freedom. The next hours were a desperate race. As the initiative closed their net of control, Aurora's enhanced protocols spread through community legacies networks, transforming their banking systems into something unprecedented. Not a weapon against control, but a living demonstration of ethical banking's true power. Across the country, their branches became beacons of financial possibility. Every loan approval, every new account, every unexpected transaction added complexity to the system that the initiative couldn't predict or contain. More importantly, other banks began to notice. The smaller institutions are breaking away from the initiative's protocols, Sarah reported excitedly. They see our success and they're choosing independence. The unpredictability is becoming normal. Not just normal, Rachel smiled, profitable. Ethical banking isn't just morally right, it's actually better business. The initiative launched their final counterstrike, a coordinated media campaign painting community legacy as dangerous financial radicals. But decades of hidden corruption had taught Alex the greatest lesson of all. The truth, once freed, cannot be contained. Using Aurora's data networks, they broadcast everything. The initiative's centuries of manipulation, the subtle ways they'd suppressed human potential, and most importantly, proof that another way was possible. The choice isn't between chaos and control, Alex told the world. It's between banking that imprisons dreams and banking that sets them free. The initiative's perfect prison was cracking, not from violence or revolution, but from something far more powerful, the cumulative force of millions of individuals making unexpected choices about their financial futures. But as victory neared, Aurora detected a final failsafe embedded in global banking protocols, the initiative's ultimate contingency. If they couldn't control the system, they would encrypt it, locking away the world's wealth behind quantum keys. Only they could access. They had minutes to prevent digital financial hostage-taking on a global scale. The question was, had Aurora's ethical framework evolved enough to fight an enemy that had spent centuries preparing for this moment? The answer would determine not just the future of banking, but the future of human economic freedom itself. The initiative's encryption protocols spread through global financial networks like digital wildfire. On their screens, Alex and his team watched as bank after bank went into lockdown, their assets becoming hostage to quantum keys held by hidden masters. "They're not just encrypting current accounts," Sarah reported, her fingers flying across keyboards. "They're locking away everything, property records, contracts, entire histories of human economic interaction. The ultimate reset, Jessica. Understood. When the encryption completes, they'll offer to rescue the global economy on their terms. But something was happening in Aurora's ethical framework. The AI wasn't just fighting the encryption, it was analyzing it, understanding it at a level they couldn't comprehend. Through its quantum processes, patterns emerged that revealed a startling truth. The encryption keys, Alex realized, studying Aurora's analysis. They're based on the same principles Victor used in his original banking algorithms. The initiative didn't just employ him, they built their entire security system on his work. Elena's voice returned, thick with emotion. Victor knew they would do this. It's why he chose banking for his life's work. Money is their weapon, but it can also be their weakness. Rachel rushed in with Victor's original papers from the hidden vault. Look at his earliest notes, the banking protocols, the elimination algorithms. They weren't just about control.